April 10th Ways and Means meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you and good evening. Is there anybody here for public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on. I think there are some updates to the budget, but we'll see them as we go along. I think I had put the free cash discussion here, but I think we'll move it down just before we talk about the warrant article, so we'll start with the school operating budget. Okay. Welcome, Dr. Conti. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you.
Sue.
Alrighty. You've received several sheets with the school budget along with the staple package. If you would open up with the page that has the yellow on it, and it's the FY20 school operating budget reductions to guideline page. It's a loose piece of paper with yellow in the front, with a yellow portion. This paper shows you the process that the school department has gone through to reach a budget that meets the guideline of 3.75%. We did have a blended guideline, but the school was at 3.75%. If you look at the top of the paper, you can see it started off at 6.23%. So it was almost $1.3 million over, and had to work pretty hard to get down to make those reductions. If you just follow along, you will see that the first set of reductions was basic expenses. They were able to make some reductions in the athletic department. They initially had budgeted because there was a problem with the washing machines and the sewer backup issue. And they were able to pull that back out of the budget because the laundry machines were fixed. They also have cut the athletic equipment budget because they're going to take some money from the athletic revolving fund. And in special education, they were able to reduce some of the expenses there because they can fund them through a grant. And then there was the salary reductions, which of course is the majority, since the majority of the school expenses are salary. They lowered the tuition budget down by $250,000, and then the next few positions that you see are vacancies, leaves of absence, some position eliminations that may or may not happen, depending on if more retirements become apparent or possible resignations. These are sort of floating, but in order to get to the guideline, they will need to reduce, it looks like, by 1, 2, 3, like 5 positions there. One's a part-time library position. And then the last yellow section is the positions that were requested and put in the initial budget, but then later were removed. So those, about 8 or 9 positions there were removed from the $54 million original budget. They did keep 5 positions in, and just to let you know, you do have a paper that says FY20 school additional position requests. It's probably the page right behind the one with the yellow on it. And that listed this for you, the $819,000 of requested positions, and then $417,000 was front to front, were removed. So in the end, only 5 new positions were included in the budget that meets the guideline. And the 5 positions are the assistant principal at Marshall Simons. There were 2 at one point. Last year there was only 1 because of budgetary restraint, and they did add back the second assistant principal at Marshall Simons. So now there is a principal and 2 assistant principals for next year. They added 1 high school ELL teacher, 1 nurse where there was a vacancy that they never filled, so they're going to fill that position, an elementary guidance at Fox Hill, and an adjustment counselor at the high school. So those 5 positions totaled $417,474, and the rest were not filled. So again, tough decisions to be made to reach guideline. You'll, as you can see, these positions are not classroom teacher positions. As you've heard in other presentations, the population in our town is changing, and we're having more students with foreign language that they need. They are not native English speakers, and more students with social and emotional needs. Hence, the guidance counselor and the school adjustment counselor, and the focus really on the last few years of additional positions has been in that guidance and support area. The budget, as I said, was at guideline, and our total operating budget for FY20 is $53,293,956. The subcommittee voted 4-0-0.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Conti, do you have anything to add or expand upon?
Again, Ms. Harrigan could be sitting here, so I think she did a wonderful job. Thank you. I'd just like to start with gratitude. The subcommittee has worked incredibly hard over the last 6 to 8 weeks. I think meeting countless times, 5 or 6 times, and gone through in great detail every line of the budget that we are presenting to you here. The process really obviously starts with our guideline conversations in the fall, and then we ask people who are in charge of their cost centers to create a budget that they feel that they need. And that's where the number comes in usually larger than the guideline that we have, and then we work backwards to try to provide them everything that they need, maintain programming, but work within the guideline that's provided. Sometimes what's missing from those conversations is context, and I think the subcommittee, honestly, working with them helps us create a better product, I think, for all of you and ultimately for town meeting. And one of the things we've been doing with staff the last 3 or 4 years that Ms. Creedon thought would be helpful to share with you is a document that we put together right before the start of school, so mid-August, before the teachers come in, and we provide this information to all staff. So it's called Burlington Public Schools, We Are Burlington, and it just talks about who our students are, again, not as people, but who they are sort of in terms of their profile. And you might have, again, just a few things I wanted to highlight in that document. So our enrollment is relatively steady. I think we're seeing increasing enrollments at the elementary level, and we may be, our high school population is, again, it's basically staying steady, but where we're seeing growth is at the elementary schools. And so, again, just between August 17, again, August 18, we saw close to 40 additional elementary students that are coming in, but our high school population, we were seeing smaller classes. So even this year, we're graduating a class of about 250, and we're predicting an incoming class of about 220. So again, our high school population is steady. But if you're looking at the overall enrollment, it would look steady. But again, there's nuance to what we're looking at. And we tend to provide in this document a district perspective, and then we break it out by school, because then our principals would talk about their individual schools with this information. So again, this is really a document that the school administration is used to dealing with, so I know it may not be in the best format, but it's the format that we have. There's an ethnicity breakdown. So I think if you want to know from a district perspective how we break out, we're seeing about 1 in 4 of our students is a student of color in Burlington. Again, from 10,000 feet, we break that out by school as well. I think one of the, again, special education is a large expense for us. Overall, the district is about 14%, which is right at the state average. And again, it might be about 20% of our budget, and again, that's also at the state average. So it's, I think that's I keep track of that just to see, we don't want to be over-identifying or under-identifying. There's some people who feel we over-identify, but if we sort of look at how the identifications are going at the state level, it's just a good barometer for us in terms of what's happening. And then numbers of referral, how much testing we're doing. When we test a student, we really want to make sure that by the time we do that, we're sort of have a high likelihood of finding a disability, because if we're testing all the time and not finding something, we're using a lot of resources that I think we should be uncovering in a different way. So we use that information throughout the year in terms of how we're doing that. On page 9 of 13, I think is I think Mrs. Creedon, you said that was the one that stood out for you, is we have about 50 languages spoken as primary languages in our school district. So I know I've been coming to you for the last 10 or 11 years, and we've talked about, we've had an expanding English language learner population, or requesting more teacher support for English language learners. Again, we're seeing a growing population, and the challenge in Burlington, which is a wonderful challenge, unlike some of districts that I'm familiar with, they may have 80% of their student population as language learners, but the vast majority might be Spanish-speaking or Portuguese-speaking, so they're just less language diverse. We have, again, a significant ELL population, but we're also covering lots of different languages in terms of translations, in terms of services that we're providing. Again, the second most populous language in our district is Gujarati, which would, again, make sense in Burlington. So there's different classifications of English language learners. So are those who are speaking, we have to do a language survey every year when we register students, what language is spoken at home. If a student starts their life speaking a language other than English, then we have to make sure, we have to assess them and then provide support as they go through. Even if a child knows social English and they can pick it up, especially when they're young, very quickly, it usually takes between, I don't know, 5, 7, 8 years for them to learn educational English. So we have to support them through it. Even you could meet a student and have a wonderful conversation with them, and we're still need to provide them academic English support throughout their learning career. Page 11, again, place of birth. We have roughly about 9% of our students are born outside of the United States, again, coming from wonderful places and bringing all of that diversity here. I would say it's great for our kids, and even for our native Burlingtonians, if that's a place, because they're going to be working in a global economy, and it gets them sort of exposure and experience. We're bringing the globe to them here in our classrooms. So I think that's just a wonderful thing. So we have, again, students born outside the United States. Economic status is something that we keep track of. Again, that's on page 12. That's the state has changed that calculation. You see that it dropped. The reason that it dropped is because the state changed how they collect that information. So they used to go from free and reduced lunch forms, and now they go from programs, mass health programs that the children and families sign up for. We've been debating with the state that that's not the most accurate, and there are many communities where they're undercounting free and reduced lunch, and because there are many families that don't want their name on any sort of database if they're here under circumstances that may not be ideal. So again, we don't have that particular issue in Burlington, but I think when I first came, we were about 5 or 6%, and so we're seeing the economically disadvantaged population doubled. It's still not, again, we're not an urban setting by any means, but we have to keep track of that information to make sure that we're providing support for those families that need support, and we do have those families. And then we also, at registration, keep track of the children of military families. We've been in conflicts for a long period of time, probably majority of my administrative life here and other places, and that has an impact on children as well if one or two or either of their parents are deployed or involved in any of the situations that we have overseas. So we'd like to keep track of that. There's counseling that we have available, and there are other benefits and services that the children may require as a result of that. So that's why we do collect that information. So a lot of times we just talk about numbers and guidelines, and again, Ms. Creedon made the suggestion that context might be somewhat important for us to discuss. You have an elementary enrollment piece here. Again, formula I have in my head always is program plus enrollment equals staffing. Staffing is about 86% of our cost. So, again, we're always tracking enrollment very carefully. Class size is of high value to the school committee, and so it's something that we take a lot of pride in and we keep track of. Class size obviously depends on the number of teachers that we have, and at this point, the number of classrooms that we have available. So there may be a time where if our enrollment continues to grow and we run out of space, then our class size, even if we could hire more teachers, we don't have the space for them. So what you're looking at in the front page is basically a cohort analysis where we have, we try to encourage as many families to register their incoming kindergarten students if they're going to be 5 before the date of August 31st, to make sure they're registered so we know who's coming in. That's the number that we know is the most variable. But again, if there are any families out there who are listening very intently to the Ways and Means meeting this Wednesday night, and you have registered your kindergarten child or your future kindergarten child, please make sure that you do so. And then the cohort analysis, we would move obviously K to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and then we're checking those class sizes. District-wide, we really try to keep our classes under 20. We've accomplished that this year. There are some bulges, and again, if we could control when people had kids and what part of town they had kids in, this would be an easier science, but it's not. So we're keeping the relative number of elementary teachers the same. Again, we're going to have about 96, so I'm talking about homeroom teachers, classroom teachers. We may have to redistribute a little bit based on where the sections are needed. But I think our class sizes look very good. Then if you turn the page, every month we get a overall district enrollment, and this is April 1st. So this would be our most recent district enrollment, and it includes, again, all the grades, out of districts, and schools. Couple points to highlight here is when we built Memorial School, we really kept a lot of, when we redistricted, we kept Fox Hill very low because we were predicting that part of town that we sort of left open was going to grow and increase in numbers, and we needed to place those kids somewhere. So you can see that over the seven or 8 years since Memorial's been open, that's come to fruition. So Fox Hill at this point is slightly bigger than Memorial School. So when you think about staffing, sometimes people have in their mind that Fox Hill's a smaller school than Memorial, and it's an equivalent school or starting to grow a little bit larger. And the other thing I want to highlight for everybody is at August 16th, so last August, before everyone arrived, we had a population of about 3,630, but you can see in April we're up close to 36 kids. So populations are more mobile. People aren't staying with jobs the way they used to stay with jobs. There's lots of construction. People are buying the houses that are being built. So we're registering kids and families throughout the year. And so those are some of the, again, the contextual pieces that we wanted to keep track of. And I think that's another important point that I wanted to make. We're presenting an operating budget that we feel meets the financial guidelines. We've talked about some of the positions the services that we reduced, the positions that were requested, and then the positions that we sort of retained, and some that we eliminated or are thinking about eliminating. But that's just one possible scenario. That's one possible scenario in the middle of April. When we get to August, the picture could be different. But what we've really tried to do and accomplished in most years is to operate within the budget and fiscal guideline that's set now and would ultimately be voted on at town meeting. But I just want to make sure this isn't we don't sort of lock this up and say, okay, we can't make any changes moving forward. If we had 40 more kindergarten students register during the summer or in August or in September, we would need to make adjustments to that. And I think we try to adjust as best we can within the guidelines that we have. But it's a moving target, and it's not nearly as predictable as it used to be, given the nature of adult work and adult lives. And I'm sure you all have lived it or have friends who are living some of the changes that are happening, and all those adult changes, all of the adult situations end up impacting children, and that's just life. So Nicole's done a fantastic job presenting the operating budget document, and that's the one with the B on it. Again, we were just joined, I think, by, Ms. Monaco, our vice chair, and Ms. Simon, our chair. So we did make that change, so that's good, so thank you. I would say at this point, this is, the numbers in this document are accurate and reflected on the budget that was presented to you tonight. We still have some content that we're going to be adding prior to town meeting over the next week or a week and a half or so. So I'll write a letter, again, some descriptions. The principals will be doing some writing, but the numbers here are where the numbers are going to stay for town meeting. And there's a lot of background information as well in terms of our history of approved budgets, our history of guidelines. The pages are numbered, and there's a table of contents, which was also feedback that we received. You can see, obviously, that 86% of what we expend is salary-based. Any reductions, any expansions, again, everything we do, we're a people-driven business. We can't do that without impacting salaries. So that's why we spend a lot of our time talking about that. And on page 11, sometimes people ask us the profile of our teachers. The teacher salary grid is basically just that. It's a grid that has years of service on one axis and degrees and credits on the other axis. And then we keep track of that. So we tried to provide a snapshot of where teachers are in terms of their learning, in terms of moving forward. And then the budget is broken down by district-wide category and then into our cost centers, which are our schools, and staffing is provided. And the end result is an operating budget at 54 million plus, or at, make sure I'm reading 53.2, I'm sorry, at 3.75%. Thank you, I was reading the wrong number. And again, our accommodated is, I think at 11,699. So,
All right, Susan?
I forgot to just say one thing. The bus situation, they're going out to bid right now for the buses. So this budget has a level-funded bus expense in it at this moment, and that the agreement was whatever the bus settles at, the difference is going to be outside of the guidelines, so that they did not need to absorb whatever the bus ends up costing in their budget. So the bus right now is level funded.
How will that show up at town meeting? Will it be an
Hopefully
amendment,
written.
or,
I didn't hear the question.
actually, maybe I know. How will the bus contract delta show up at town meeting?
It's a warrant article,
Okay,
and it's just for the increase, it's not for the overall contract.
great.
That was one of the details. I still have to do accommodated, or do we want to take questions on
Let's
operating
just
first?
follow through on the questions here. So, are there any questions with the committee on the budget? Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Conti, on the fiscal year 20 school operating budget reductions to guideline, one of the items I saw that do not fill craftsman position in maintenance department. Now, obviously, the schools get a lot of use, you need a maintenance person. Is this a one particular position that one person has, or just one of many craftsmen?
It's one of several, so we're just down a person.
All right. I just want to make sure we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, if you know. And a lot of the reductions are in special ed, something we don't have any control over. Are we reducing in areas where we're going to have to pay later on at the end of the year? Are we putting ourselves in jeopardy with that?
I don't believe so. We have a new director of special education. She's gone through this very carefully. I think she looked at our entitlement grants, and those are grants that we receive every year from the federal government. I think she's moved some of those positions that were appropriate into some of those grants. So I think some of the reductions you see here may be reductions in operating, but we're picking up some of those services and costs in our entitlement grants. special ed is a moving target. So I would say we hope that we can accomplish everything we're planning on. And given the population and the students that we have, we believe that we're in a good position to do that right now.
Is that
Thank
Tom?
you, Mr. Chair.
Diane?
Thank you, Dr. Conti, for going through and following what I had requested. The reason that I wanted to discuss at length about the different languages, we educate 645 students now where English isn't their first language. And when it came time to doing positions, it was really challenging because we have to, of course, meet all the needs of those students, but we weren't able to add in things like math tutors or other really important things. So looking forward to the future, we need to be prepared that we're going to have to keep adding in, even next year, possibly 2 assistant principals, because if you look at the numbers, Fox Hill School, I mean, it's 50 years old, it's gonna need to be rebuilt, but it's actually at a higher occupancy now than Memorial is. So, they met this year, and it was really hard to reduce it, but we have to be prepared for next year. So you're gonna have a lot of staffing positions, and, we're gonna have to talk about 2 schools possibly.
Questions? Other questions? Sonia?
I guess just a quick question, thank you, Diane. If I can go back to the buses, so that contract, when is that bed scheduled to be open, Dr. Conti?
I think Friday.
Oh, great, so is it a 3-year contract? Is it something that then a warrant this year, but then we would build it back into the budget for next, or?
That would be the plan, I think, depending on the amount. I guess, and I have to see, but I think it's a 5-year contract, which is why we're asking town meeting to vote. Typically, we've done a 3-year with a 2-year rollover, and our consultant said he would rather just do a 5-year straight up, and so town meeting has to approve anything over 3 years.
Thank you, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. I'm good.
All right. David?
Just to expand on that again, so with the warrant article, this may be for you, Mr. Chair, are we going to raise and appropriate that amount, or free cash that amount? How do we encompass that within the budget next year so there isn't that big jump? Do we just go out of budget for this year, raise and appropriate so that it is an operating budget item?
Let's see what the amount is, and then,
We'll have to-
but you're right, it should be considered part of the operating budget. And
So that
if
next
so,
year,
then
you're
that,
not doubling the.
Exactly.
Well, and again, I think that's one of the reasons we held it out. It would have been really difficult for us to make guideline not knowing that number. So I think, again, we're grateful that that number was held out, and I think I agree with Mr. Riggs. When we find out what the number is, I'm saying we're gonna absorb it into our operating, but if it's $1 million, I'm telling you, we would have a whole lot of trouble. So I don't know how.
Dr. John, so I'm not saying that you need to absorb it, I'm saying, let's say that, let's pick a number out of the blue, 200,000.
Right.
I'm in effect saying, raise and appropriate that as if that was in your budget, so your number did go up to 3.8. Set the baseline, so that next year, we're not starting at that level funding.
Again, I think depending on the size of the number, I think that would make sense, because obviously we're gonna carry those costs for the next 5 years.
Right.
yeah, I think I agree, David. Here comes.
Could I just comment on that, because
Sure.
going back to the original guideline meeting, I think the agreement and the understanding was it wasn't gonna be taken out of our budget, it wasn't gonna be counted against us in our guideline.
Right.
So it's gonna build into the budget, and that's gonna cause our actual guideline to go from 375 up to whatever it goes to. But we're allowed to exceed the guideline by whatever that amount is.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think, David's question was about the funding source, not so much about the money.
Right, so it's gonna raise and appropriate, it's gonna be in
Right.
the budget. This is
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Right,
It's
because
gonna cause that with our guideline.
Right, right.
Right.
I think if I can just piggyback on that, I think you're on the right track on that. The goal is really so that next year, you're not penalized on the theory that the number is then significantly larger than the line item this year. That's what you're basically saying on the raise and appropriate, right?
Baseline next year should be. if
Exactly,
there's an
should be
additional
added in
plus.
with that number.
Right. And raise and appropriate will be built into the tax rate, so
Correct.
that'll be
Like
smooth
an
as well.
operating budget. Yep.
So on the technicality of that, Mr. Chairman, then is that 2 votes from town meeting, the approval of a 5-year contract plus the funding mechanism for the Delta?
I haven't seen the whole warrant yet, but
Yeah.
I think it has to be 2.
2, okay.
All right, back to you. Tom?
Okay.
On the budget reductions guideline page, what does LOA stand for?
Leave of absence?
Okay, thank you.
Frank?
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I know there's a lot of work here. It's pretty obvious, and it looks like it's a very carefully prepared budget. So that's a big congratulations just on getting it in this kind of shape. I have one kind of basic question which goes back to base budgeting. So in FY19, the total operating budget was 51,367, correct? That's what's printed here. And was that the number that was approved at town meeting in the original May approval of the operating budget?
Yes.
So the actual budget, the actual money spent were more than that because we had to take care of the overrun, correct?
That was in 18. Those were 18 expenses.
That's right, it occurred at the end of the year, so it was an 18 budget
If-
overrun.
If you look on page 8,
Yeah, okay,
showing the year over
that's
year,
my mistake.
the 2018
Right.
accommodated includes the 870.
Yeah, so you got that 14, okay. But not, but at the top, so in the FY18 bar graph on page 8, thank you for those page numbers, by the way. It's 49,630. Was that the approved town meeting number, or is that the total operating money spent for 18?
So the additional 700 is not added onto these figures.
It's not.
Because it wasn't a
Okay,
transfer to
so-
fund budget. It
So,
was,
so from 18 to 19, you were fairly confident that you had the 19 budget better structured, better accounting for it, and so you're tracking that every month now, and you think that you're pretty much on target with the 19 budget inside of the 51,367. Is that where you're at?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so the 375% increase that you're requesting is off of that base budget, and that's a base budget that you're fairly confident you're going to hit, outside of it is the answer.
Yes.
Right? Okay, that's good. A different question on, you gave us some percentages on special education, and I think it was, of the total population, roughly 14% falls underneath a special education condition. Is that in-district and out-of-district, that 14%?
Yes, I believe it.
So that's all, anyone on an IE, what we call it, individual ed plan or an out-of-district, it's 14% roughly.
Yes, sir, I believe that's how we calculate it.
I think that's pretty important to me. I want to be sure of that.
Just let me check, but I believe that's the case, so I will check.
Okay, so assuming that that is the case, you also said that it falls roughly within the state averages of the percentages. And in fact, I believe Burlington's been tracking between 14 and 15% special education of its population for quite some time, if I'm correct. So the reason I want to bring that out, highlight that just a little bit, is I think some of our constituents and some town meeting members incorrectly think that we have an abnormally high special education program in terms of clients and in terms of costs, and I think we're very much in the averages. And then I think you go out of your way to not overcompensate or to miss people. That we try to do a really good job getting to the right people. And I think you'd agree with the statement that I'm making, that we're not an outlier of a larger number or bigger expenses. We're in the averages.
I would say we're, again, I don't see us as being an outlier at all. It's hard to pin down because the whole point of an individualized plan is that the costs associated with that plan
Whatever they need.
are individualized.
Right,
So,
right, and that's the way it should
So
be.
it's not just about the number of kids, it would be about the individualized services that those children require. And some may require more expensive services than others.
But I would say, in a large enough population, we've got a pretty good-sized total cohort. It's a pretty good-sized population. So averages start to have more meaning. Even though they're individualized, you can get a rough sense of what we're looking like compared to a town of a similar size and makeup. And I think that we're doing a good job, and I think we're doing what we should do. And it is expensive, I think we all know that, but it's good to see that it's in line. I think that's the only two things that I really wanted to bring up, so thank you.
Sorry, it's just, do you know what the number of out-of-district placements is?
Yes.
My quick digging through this, I didn't see it.
If you look at the elementary enrollments, and then if you look on our April 1st number,
Okay.
you see the last line is, we have 85 students.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Are there other questions?
Chairman, motion to approve the school budget at 53 million, I'm doing it without accommodator, right? 53,293,956, 3.75%.
Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? 13-0-0. So we move on to the accommodate?
Yes. If the accommodated information, just so you know, in this staple packet is back on page 26, I think it is, yeah, page 26. The total budget is $11,699,108, which is a 6.59% increase. Just one new program that was added this year is at the high school level. They're going to be doing a skills, basic skills program. They have several students coming up from 8th grade into 9th and have found that it's going to be less expensive and more beneficial for the students to stay in district and have one teacher and one aide. So it's going to cost almost $100,000 for those two staff, and that would provide a more economical and a better placement for this group of students who are coming in from 8th grade. And these students in special ed, as you probably know, are covered under the school district from age 3 to age 22. So these, 14-year-olds will be, depending on how many years they need services, would be, hopefully be able to stay in district through a lot of it. So that was the one new program that's going on as we continue to bring special ed programs in district if we have enough students and it makes sense to do it. And in this case, it seemed very reasonable plan to do that. Other than that, there's not a lot of changes in the special ed system. We still have the Discovery Program at Pine Glen. We still have, obviously, the early childhood program that's been going on for many years now, and all are functioning well. I don't think there was any new highlights there at all. So that was a 6.59% increase, and we voted 4-0-0 to support it. And I think staffing-wise, it was just the new high school staff that was added to this. Am I right on that? I might be missing something there.
That program, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that was really on the accommodated side. Was there anything else that I'm missing, Diane?
Up to six kids.
Up to 6 kids
Yeah,
that are coming into
Targeted.
9th grade.
So it's up to 6 kids that we could possibly be saving the out-of-district cost to add this in, so it's very exciting.
Great. Dr. Conti, do you have anything to add about the accommodated accounts?
Not really. Again, we have a new director of special education. I think we build the accommodated account based on students. I think one of the things that we tried to do, or I think we accomplished this year, was it, I think 2 years ago, it was 18, we really took all flexibility that we had out of the accommodated account, meaning that we're very conservative with the circuit breaker budgeting typically. And that means we were sort of betting on the state fulfilling their requirement to fund that. And that's always a shaky proposition. So I think the accommodated account in front of you, we budgeted the circuit breaker at 65%. So we've also built in some of that. Again, the House budget just came out from the state today, and they have it budgeted at 72%. But again, that's a moving number. So we can have some.
We'll see.
I think, Ms. Rollins, I think you were part of that conversation where the accommodated account is honestly really built student by student. So it changes every year, and we look at it every year. We can't make predictions. There may be things that change. There could be families that move into town. But the number that you're looking at are the costs associated with providing education to the students and programs that are a part of that. And these are our most unpredictable and most volatile costs associated with educating kids in town.
Great. Questions? Tom?
Yes, the revenue that comes in from football, from sporting events, from the use of the gym when we host tournaments, is that controlled by the athletic director or by you?
That's in the athletic revolving account, so I'd say it's controlled by the athletic director. I mean, ultimately, I'm responsible for everything, but I'm saying I don't necessarily would tell him what hurdles to buy or anything.
Is that reflected anywhere in the accommodated accounts page?
The sheet
That's-
revolving.
Part of the revolving accounts, it's not part of accommodated.
Oh, it's not, it isn't, oh, I thought it was, okay, I'm sorry.
No, Mr. Hill, a revenue source in the accommodated, for our preschool, for instance, we have students who were mandated to educate, and those are 3- and 4-year-olds who have an identified disability. We have an integrated program, which means we have typically developing children educated next to the children who were mandated to educate. The parents of the typically developing children pay tuition to have their kids in that programming because it's very high-quality programming. That revenue, which is roughly, I think, about $180,000 a year, that goes to the town general fund. So I'm saying I think that goes into the town, those tuition dollars.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is more of a kind of an overall budget question, but I was wondering if you could provide just kind of an update or appraisal of the new budgeting system processes and so forth that were put in place. How is that going?
Again, from my perspective, the second year is even better than the first year because it has more context and we were able to look at actual expenses. We're tracking things very carefully, obviously after the over expenditure. So as we're building the next budget, we have a very good idea as to what the expense was. So even if we overexpended a line, again, in a very large budget, we could go back and see, was that over expenditure because something wasn't managed well or because just the cost went up? And if the cost just went up, then we would make sure when we budgeted for this year, we increased that line to make sure that we cover those costs. So again, I'm very happy with the system. I think it allows us to do more projecting, which has been, again, a very good tool for us to have. And it gets to Mr. Monaco's point of, we're getting those updates every month, and I think we're, again, I'm never comfortable until the close of the year, but I'm saying I'm more comfortable sitting here now than I would have been in the past.
Great. Thanks.
Diane?
And I just wanted to reiterate, it's been really incredible for us because we get a monthly breakdown. So anytime there is any concern, it's addressed immediately, and it's made a huge difference for us. And Tom, I also just wanted to mention about the revolving accounts. We had the sheet printed up. We review the revolving accounts on a monthly, well, Nicole reviews it and gives the information to us. And you can see that $34,000 is coming from the athletics to help offset some operating expenses. So as far as I'm concerned, the financial information is just been incredible.
And again, just one final comment is I think it also reflects a whole lot of work. So the simplicity in the numbers means there's a whole lot of work done to prepare those and to have that information available. And again, Nicole deserves all the credit for doing that work. So it's been, Again, the transition wasn't handled well. That's my responsibility, but since we've made the transition, the work that we've been seeing has been, I think, much improved.
Great.
Great. Anything else, Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one more thing that sort of came to mind when you were asking about offsets and the cherry sheet and, well, actually, it was the accommodated account, the circuit breaker. So the circuit breaker money, the state budgets, once you hit the circuit breaker, then a certain percentage of what's over the state will pick up. And they're budgeting for 70-something percent. You budgeted for 65. So in our accommodated account number, you're assuming a 65% circuit breaker kickback and the rest we own. And does that money go right to the accommodated account, or does it go into the general fund of the town? Where does the circuit breaker money go?
It's held in a separate account.
And is it applied to special education
Yes.
directly?
Yes.
Okay, so then that makes it easy. But the other one is what we call a cherry sheet, which is the color of the paper that the town provides these reimbursements for certain things. So we get Chapter 90 money, which is separate. On the cherry sheet, what's on it besides schools that's significant? Anything? The schools pretty much it.
I think don't we get money from the highway?
That's Chapter 90.
Oh, that's 90, right, not 70.
The reason I'm asking is because that money is not reflected here. That goes to the general fund, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the Chapter 70 dollars, yes.
Yeah, it's Chapter 70, right, okay. Do you have any idea what kind of Chapter 70 money? Is there anything we're doing that can make that number bigger or smaller from the way we run the schools, first of all? Not the wealth of the town.
Right.
Or the tax structure of the town, but the way we run the schools.
All right, I'll do my best, and then Nicole will correct me. So, the driver for the cherry sheet, the wealth of a community is one of those drivers. So about 25 years ago, the state established a foundation formula. The foundation formula is what's referred to as Chapter 70. What they tried to do with the foundation formula is provide a minimal level of funding for public education so that a child in, zip code doesn't matter, a child in Burlington and a child in Brockton would have the same foundational education. So Brockton gets 90% of their funding from the state, we might get 20% of our funding from the state. So they look at relative wealth and they try to do that. That was great 25 years ago. The trouble is they haven't made any adjustments in 25 years. So the recent debate that they're talking about in terms of school finance, if you've followed any of it, are to reconsider that formula. So what's changed? Well, there are, again, 4 primary areas. Healthcare is a huge expense for many districts, and they fund it differently than we fund it collaboratively. But those costs weren't adjusted for a long period of time, so obviously that's taking more local dollars to make up the difference. Special education is a huge expense that's been growing for all communities. Economically disadvantaged is a huge expense. Again, the state changed the calculation, so they might be undercounting in communities like Chelsea 300 or 400 students who just aren't showing up on the roll, so they've lost a tremendous amount of funding. And then English language learners is a growing population in the state of Massachusetts. We're seeing that here in Massachusetts. That's also an area that the state has to make up. So, Mr. Monaco, to establish that foundation, there are many communities, I think around 166 out of the 350 or so, that their school budget is actually at foundation. So when the state establishes that amount 25 years ago, that's when they're funding. About 26% of the average state funding is usually 26% over that foundation. We're even higher than that. So the reason the cherry sheet matters, and we may get more revenue, but the revenue picture would be, if we were to fund just to what the cherry sheet said on revenue or just to what the foundation was, we'd probably have to close one of our schools. So that's the community funds education generously, I can make that statement, generously based on a 25-year-old formula that the state has established. There are many other communities that don't have the revenues, so they actually are still funding at that level, which is why there's huge disparities in now the ability for communities to fund that, which is why zip code really matters more today than it did in '93 when this law was passed. So the challenge now, what the state is trying to do is to rethink that formula. They're going to direct a lot more of state money. They have to increase revenues, but they're going to have to direct that towards urban settings, gateway cities, rural communities. There are many districts in Western Mass that have declining enrollment. So again, the challenge here is the cherry sheet is meaningful. We may get, I think last year we got $400,000 more in state revenue, but we're spending so much over that foundation already that, again, I think every year at the guideline conversation, there's a gap that's included, whatever that sort of gap we have to make up. I'm sure the Chapter 70 money helps close that gap, but if we were ever to be held to, again, foundation funding,
Right.
we would be
So,
have trouble.
if we were to run the district at foundation, would be underwater. It's pretty
Yeah,
obvious.
we'd have to close an elementary
Right.
school.
So, I understand that, and, you know, the state may or may not fix
Nicole said
that.
2 elementary schools.
What's that?
Nicole said 2 elementary schools.
Okay, but that's just the way it is.
Yes.
But nonetheless, even though the state has a ridiculous foundation level and the calculation doesn't make a whole lot of sense to meet the objective, we still receive Chapter 70 money.
Yes.
And you think it's in the $400,000 area?
That was the increase.
That was the
That was the
increase.
increase.
The increase. So, does anyone have any idea how much Chapter 70 money we actually do get for schools?
I don't have the total. off the top.
We can find that out again. I
Okay,
didn't look at
and
it,
are
but-
you allowed, so it goes into the general fund, and does the state allow you to use that Chapter 70 money any place it wants in its budget? I believe we do.
Yes, it's from
Yes.
general education.
Right.
Right.
But the source of it is because of education.
Yes.
All right, it would be interesting to know, you know, there's this whole discussion about the percentage of our total budget, how much is schools and how much isn't, and the offset from Chapter 70 is a good thing, even though it's not anywhere near as much money as we'd like, but it helps us a lot.
Right, and I think general aid to communities in 2008, when the economy tanked, I think the governor, the strategy at the time was to try to level fund schools, if I remember correctly, but a lot of communities on their, on the state money for local aid dropped significantly. So I'm saying, I think so I think there's a complexity to that. We can find out what the state revenue is in terms of Chapter 70. What we're presenting tonight is an expense side budget, not a
Right.
revenue side budget.
And there isn't anything we can do the way we run our schools to make our current Chapter 70 system do any more for us.
No, again, I think the way we spend money, and again, Nicole could correct me if I'm wrong, is we try to spend federal dollars first, state dollars second, and then
Our
local
own
dollars
dollars last.
last.
Right.
So
Okay.
we never get to the end of a year and leave state dollars on the table.
Thank you.
One other thing that may be of consideration, and especially if you talk to our local representation, is for the accommodated account that we were just talking about, we're mandated to provide educational services, but we're also mandated, if those services take place outside of the district, we're mandated to provide transportation back and forth to those services. So there are some placements where the transportation costs are just as high as the programming costs. Currently, transportation costs aren't eligible for a circuit breaker. So one of the things that we are doing as a superintendent's organization is petitioning the state to allow those transportation costs to be eligible for circuit breaker relief from the state, because it's still a mandate that we have to provide transportation, and we feel that would benefit all districts if the state, again, would help fund that mandate that they've required. So if that ever comes up in conversation, or there's a bill, I'll certainly ask you to say it would be very helpful to have that state support.
So Frank, just a data point, it looks like the Chapter 70 funds for 2018 were about $6 million.
6 million.
6.5 is what.
And
Sorry.
And I'm under the assumption that the town can use that money from the general fund for anything.
Yes, and if you look at the
Do.
overall budget, it's part of the revenue.
It's an offset to the whole budget.
Right, it's offset to the whole budget.
Right, so 6 million, so that's over 10% of our whole operating costs.
Yeah,
It's pretty
For
good.
schools, yeah.
yeah, for
For
schools.
schools, right. Well, you wouldn't get it if you didn't have schools.
John, was that your point?
That was exactly what.
Okay, golly, love the internet. Tom, you had a question?
Yes, I have a question. So if our student population even gets more diversified, does that mean that we'll get more money? Does that put us in a category to get more money from the state?
We would get, you get additional state money for language support, and you get additional state money for economically disadvantaged. So it would depend on the profile of the student, but it could lead to us getting some additional state money.
But it's also, it's not 100% money. It's still a fraction of what it costs us.
Exactly.
Right.
So, but again, it might be an additional $300 depending on the profile of the student. The state has a formula that they, where they would do that, but again, the context helps drive the amount of Chapter 70 dollars that you get from the state.
Thank you, Tom. Other questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
Speak up.
Make a motion to approve.
The amount is $11,699,108.
Second?
All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? 13,000. Wait, can I add?
It's a big pass.
13,000. I'm going to. Okay, is there anything else in the school?
I think actually we're all set.
All right, we did,
Great job.
great, we did all the school warrant articles last week, so great, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Conti, thank you for Nicole and the school committee and everybody who helped put the school budget together, and our subcommittee has put in many hours, and the efforts are very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, shall we move on to the free cash disposition? Frank, David, you're going to talk through it?
Sure. So Town Hall 1 takes up the topic each year of free cash. I've updated the memo, or John updated the memo for us, kind of outlining all the uses that we're proposing. So I think what I'll do, Mr. Chairman, is just kind of run through our discussion, and then we can specifically talk about the warrants as they appear, because we did take votes on each one. So for the update with the new members, in essence, free cash, at the end of the year, the books are closed, and we have to certify free cash before we can use it. So again, ultimately, that cash is not accessible until it's certified. Typically, it takes until the fall to certify that free cash. So last year, we closed the books. We also have, though, stabilization fund. So it isn't 100% we can't use it, but for the most part, that free cash is not accessible. Our stabilization fund, which is a higher barrier to entry, it's two-thirds majority to get utilize the funds in stabilization. That's at about an $8.9 million balance. So if you look at the sheet that was prepared by John, certified last year, $11,672,000. We typically have historically liked to go in with at least a $4 million number into next year. So deducting $4 million. In January's town meeting of last year, we did utilize some funds from our free cash. One was the replacement of our reserve fund for $219,000. We also had the water rate stabilization fund of $69,384. And we also replenished to our stabilization account the $700,000 that was utilized for the schools. This year, we didn't take positions, but if we expend from free cash our warrant articles, those total warrant articles on school side and town side as presented in the budget, total $3,159,576. So again, deducting all those out, you have $3,523,967 that in effect is available. So what we've done, and we had a very lengthy discussion, Frank, myself, and Roger attended, is kind of what are the other pieces that we could utilize the free cash for? And there's a whole gamut of those that we could do. We can put money in stabilization. We could put money in OPEB. We could buy down bands instead of converting those into bonds. We could take a look at our debt schedule and reduce bonds. We could take some additional items that were meant for bonding on this warrant and utilize free cash for that purpose, thus not putting them on our bond schedule. So we had all of those discussions, the pros and cons, where things stood, and what have you. So first of all, a few line items that we thought were appropriate to use, as there are two larger, Article 26 and 27, which is the water main, the bond authorization for the water main replacement of $1 million, and the bond authorization for the Mall Road streetlights at $1.1 million. Those are slated, were slated for bonding purpose. The subcommittee voted 2-0 in favor of supporting that as a free cash authorization to, instead of putting that on the bond schedule. So those were two. We had a very lengthy discussion on stabilization fund. And should we put some money into some additional funds in the stabilization fund? We do not have a policy on what stabilization should be at. Should it be a percentage of the budget, the operating budget? What's really the use for stabilization? Is it, again, at some points to stabilize the tax rate? Is it for capital items that come up very unexpected that cost funds? Is it to stabilize our 32B account, as we've done before as well, and how much should that be? So without getting a lot of the detail, the 8.9 seemed like a sufficient number as we voted last year. We're keeping it in effect the same. We did use some, but we replenished it. So the subcommittee voted 2-0 not to fund any additional funds into the stabilization account. Thus, we would not move forward with that warrant line item. We then talked about OPEB. And again, OPEB is, this year, we have an actuarial study that's due. That's required every 2 years and will be done as of 12/31/18. But we won't get the report probably until the fall. We know that's a big number. We have a plan in place for that, which we adopted a number of years ago, which is part of the operating budget. So that's something that's steady. But again, it's a big number. As we know, the more money you can get into the fund, we have access to the fund, but the more money you get into it, the more it can earn over time, and thus it will just save us money down the road. So the subcommittee voted to support an additional payment into the OPEB fund of $500,000. So when you look down, you'll see the $500,000 from the transfer into the OPEB, the two warrant articles that we would vote to utilize the free cash, which then leaves a balance of $923,967. We didn't feel, we've got a lot of projects that are coming due, that are coming up, so carrying additional monies in free cash is not a bad thing. Every other year, we do have our paving bond of $3 million that we've been able to, the last 3 years, been able to keep off our bonding schedule. So what we decided to do was carry that also into the free cash line item. So the total that would be carried into free cash for next year would be the $4,923,967. So I guess from a voting standpoint, I don't have the warrant in front of me. There was, so Frank, do you have that? But there were certain line items with monies into a stabilization fund, money into OPEB.
Right. Well, so you have article number 5, the transfer to OPEB here. That's the line, one of the line items that you voted on. So I think the whole committee could vote on that one.
Correct.
The other two for the water main replacement and the Mall Street lights,
Just the use would be
you're
for free
voted on
cash.
the use of free cash.
Free cash instead of
The
bond.
source would become free cash in the motion.
Right, and those two items will come back separately, probably they're on the DPW list of things.
Right.
Vote for the motions themselves, right? Does that make sense?
Right.
Yep.
So, All right, so before we do any votes, are there
But also from your
questions?
warrant, do you also have, there's an article for
Stabilization.
funds to the stabilization fund?
Yes, that's
So-
number
So
4.
we're,
We could vote
we're
on that one
saying
as
to not fund anything into stabilization.
So let's have some questions, and then we'll come back and vote the two things. John first?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few things here. So one is, definitely we should make a mental allocation for the school bus transportation increase that's, likely to be a few hundred K. So we should sort of mentally subtract that off, I would suggest.
May not be free
So
cash.
earlier,
Or, okay,
our discussion was more along the lines of that should be raise and appropriate, not free cash. Because it's
So-
not a one-time expense.
I understand certainly for future years that would be the case, but where would it be funded from for
Raise and appropriate.
FY
Raise and
'20?
appropriate.
Raise and appropriate, the same as the full operating budget.
Okay, maybe I'm not understanding exactly what you mean by that then. Clearly, the raise part can't be changed at this point, since it's been set for next year.
No,
Sorry, this is
no.
next
No.
year's budget.
Budget.
So.
It'll be set
Raise and-
after town
Raise and
meeting.
appropriate means that it's included in the total, that when they set the tax rate, the taxes have to be set to raise that much money. And that tax rate setting will happen in, I'm not helping, am I?
No,
In
I
November,
think
right.
this is actually a point of confusion for a lot of people. What we're doing for FY '20, we are not setting the tax rate.
No.
Right.
What we're doing is conditioning what the tax rate's likely to be by spending money that will require raise and appropriate from taxes.
So I'm gonna cut to the chase. I believe, given that the levy has been voted on, so we're,
No.
That's for last year.
Voting.
19.
The levy that was
FY
voted on
'20
was,
is completely afloat till November.
right.
okay, let me try it differently then. Sure, in the end, it either is going to come out of free cash or it's going to come out of more revenue, sure. Okay, at any rate, I won't belabor that point. The other question I would have is, on the 3.1 that you have for warrants, does that assume the extra 125,000 that
Yes.
we voted on last time? Okay, great. All right,
That's, I'm sorry. That's assuming that everything that's on,
everything.
that we haven't voted on
passes,
yet,
sure.
that everything passes, that's the number.
Okay.
If we don't vote something, it gets pulled off of that number, thus goes down to free cash.
Okay, and then I just had one or two understanding questions I wanted to ask. The free cash, in order to spend that requires town meeting approval?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Everything requires town meeting.
Simple
approval.
majority,
And
Yeah.
same with stabilization requires town meeting approval?
two-thirds vote.
Two-thirds. And reserve is controlled by Ways and Means?
Right.
Okay. And in terms of free cash, there's effectively I'll call it a blackout period from the fiscal year end until sort of October-ish when free cash is certified that the money can't be spent at all.
And a town meeting to do with the voting, but yes.
Right, okay, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
To help, I think this will help a little more. So, first of all, stabilization is at 8.9 million, and actually, it's probably slightly higher. So that's earning somewhere around 2% a year, I think. It just sits there in an account. You probably know, John, what's it earning?
No, I think that's what Brian had told us.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
so,
like a CD or something.
yeah, so we can always get at it with 30 days' notice, we can get all of it. So that's essentially $9 million and growing is really where it's at for FY '20. And we, in the discussions about how big should stabilization be, I think to the administration's credit, and the point they made is, they don't look at it as his stabilization, his free cash. They look at it as his money that's been collected and has no encumbrance on it. There are no encumbrances on either one, and both are available to be used for anything that town meeting were to approve it for, anything that's legal, period. So if you look at that collectively, if you've got 9 in stabilization and, now we'll have in excess of 4 in free cash at the start of FY '20. 9 and 4 is 13. We felt like that was probably a pretty safe number for the scale of our operating budget, a very safe number. And therefore, the only discussion was how much of it, what's the balance between free cash and stabilization? And even though it's locked up, free cash between July 1 and something like November, in a real emergency, we could get at our money. And, you know, if something like, you know, the gas lines blow up all over town and 2 buildings burn down and we have no fire trucks, we could get at our money. So it seemed like a very safe level of money and the right way to divide it up, and that's how we came down on that. And that is, the question's been answered, but the amount of money for warrants it includes everything that the schools needed and even a little more on the town side. They're about $1.5 million each. The split was, we started with 1.4, this ends up more like 1.5 plus. So that's all covered, and we still can roll over $4,923,000. That's how we got there. And as for the levy limit, not the levy limit, the levy, all this gets calculated out when everything settles out on raise and appropriate, and then the valuations are done. You get the tax rate and you get the total amount raised. We know we're in the ballpark. It would take big changes for us to have to worry about having an abnormally high increase. So you can't calculate it ahead of time. You can only sort of keep it in a boundary condition, and that's what we're doing with all of this, okay?
Okay. Other questions? Mike?
Yeah, so you touched on it a little bit, Frank. I was curious about the expenditure on warrants. Do we do that each year depending on what we see as need, or is there kind of a baseline amount that we go in thinking, okay, we're going to put in $3 million for warrants? I think it used to be 2.5 before, but how does that get
Well, the
determined?
administration looks at what they think the need, the needs are always greater. The wants exceed what we probably could do, even if we used up all of this money. The wants are you know, way outside of this norm. So they try to come up with a reasonable number that's sort of a percentage of what's available out of the whole pot. So out of our 11 million, you do the drawdowns, and they started out with a 1.4 million for each side, 50-50. Last year, schools gave up some because the town needed some more. That worked out. This year, both sides are looking, you know, the feeling is we've got enough, and the number was moved up. You know, you could make a motion on town meeting floor to fund something out of the blue, and out of free cash, and it could happen. I've seen it happen, actually. But we think this is just a good divide. It's a judgment call. If any department, any town meeting member, like we did sidewalks out of the blue last year, right? I think it was a couple of, yeah, it was a lot of money. Came right out of free cash.
But who's to say next year that number doesn't go up to 4 million? Like, where is there some
Well, you
type
have a
of
5-year
oversight?
plan. You have a 5-year capital plan. It's really intended for infrastructure and capital. And anything that's big enough that you can't support it this way, it's usually a bondable item. And anything that isn't, is gonna go on this list. So for example, we know there's a $3 million highway project coming up next year. Would just as soon take it out of free cash. And you can look at a fire truck, you can see them out there. So, you know, it's a judgment call. This year, for the things that are needed, that are really needed, I don't know of anything has not been funded that we could have carried in free cash that's in the $500,000 to $2 million range. I don't know if John does or schools aren't here, but I think we've covered them, so that's how you get a number. But it really is a judgment call and a guesstimate. And like I said, it's not unheard of to see something hit the floor at town meeting that sort of gets cobbled in out of a piece of a warrant that's already there. And that's how we hit the sidewalks the last time.
Yeah, I think, so if I can, the 2.5 in past years and the 3+ this year, for sort of budgeting purposes for both the schools and the town, to propose what they would do for warrant articles. It's sort of a target. Obviously, we vote individually, as does the school committee, on individual warrant articles about whether we should spend that money. So it's not like this number here is pre-allocated
No.
or anything.
It can move.
It can move. The important piece is just getting a list of things that are candidate for warrant articles for consideration.
Yeah, but we usually fit it inside a certain
Right.
limit, just to say, okay, this is how much we can spend, and, because you
Yeah, I
could
mean,
spend
We intentionally
a lot
didn't do air
each year.
conditioning, and one-third of the air conditioning in Francis Wyman last year because it didn't fit. And the feeling was, if we had squeezed that in, you wouldn't have carried over the 4 million. So is it better to squeeze it in or to carry over the 4 million? And we opt on the side of trying to keep that much of a tailwind going into the
It's,
next budget season. It just didn't fit.
Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The flip side of this is I just noticed that it's approximately 25% more that we're carrying over in free cash. And I think I heard the answer to this, but basically, the reason for the additional 25% is that you're looking ahead in the capital budget for the next year, and you think that it's more applicable to be used at that, or it's better used at that time than it is now.
So, if I may, so we went down the whole list of banned/small enough bondable or bond buy-down items. There really wasn't anything else out there that was sitting there to pick off for $1 or $2 million this year.
Okay.
And we intentionally decided that we just don't need to stuff more into stabilization. Therefore, you ended up with this number. It's just, we're just better off than you might otherwise be. But we know in FY '20, we already know there's a $3 million item that we'd like to buy down right away. So we just assume,
Buy it down then.
yeah, just build up a little bit more.
Yeah,
That's where it
that's what I
ended up.
thought I heard. I just
Yeah.
wanted to confirm.
Yep.
Thanks.
Mom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason that I had requested to take a look at this last meeting, and I just wanted, so I've been fortunate enough to be on Ways and Means for nearly 20 years. And I remember, first coming to the meetings, and I am pretty darn proud of what this committee has done over those years in tightening up everybody's budget and making sure that every penny, as best we can, gets spent reasonably well. And I think we have done that. So, past administrations, Bob and John, have said to us and in front of town meeting, well, we're lucky, when times have gotten tough, we're lucky we're Burlington. And I've heard that often enough. And then it just made me think and said, well, all these years we've been lucky we're Burlington. And if we're having sort of discussions about what are we going to do with all the money we have, does it go to free cash, does it go to stabilization? So my thought is that I would like to see us try to think out of the box. And of course, I checked with the town clerk's office. There are about 9,500 residential addresses in this town. So if we did something, I mean, a lot of people think this might be crazy, but I don't think it is. But if we were to give every residential address a check for $200 from the town, and then showing that the residents that we appreciate their support of the town and the town budgets and what they've done, and that would come out to be $1.9 million, which, based upon what we have in free cash over the past years, would not have hurt us that much if we had done something like that. It would be nice to be able to do something like that. I guess it hasn't been done by other communities, but we are fortunate enough that we do have some money to be able to pay off bills a little sooner. And it would be nice, be a great way to give, especially the senior citizens that are on fixed incomes, living off their social security check, in which even a tax bill is a burden for them. And I would just like to see us just try to come up with an idea to give back to the community if we have this extra cash. And I think it would be a great idea. I mean, after all, the state of Alaska does give every resident a check because of the oil revenue that they have. So, it's not something that a town couldn't do. And I know it would, some people might say that, they're gonna expect it every year. No, you have to make it clear. This is a one-shot deal. We're doing really well this year. Thank you for your support. And, the residents, I think, would be very appreciative of it. It It would be something different, and it would be nice to see if there's a way we could do something. It doesn't have to be in that form, but it would be nice to do something. You know, and I know the argument is, well, we spend the money wisely, we're keeping the tax rate down. I understand that, I'm not, you know, the whole idea is that if you give a politician an excuse to spend an extra dollar, they will, and they'll spend $5. But it would be nice to try to think about the bar and have a discussion on that at Ways and Means at some future date about if that's something possible we could do, or what would be the best avenue to go about that route. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep, interesting idea. Anything further on, or should we vote on a couple of warrant articles?
So does free cash, does it get interest also? Does it grow, I mean, is that sitting somewhere where it's getting something?
John, we asked you here and we haven't let you speak yet. Welcome.
So free cash is just a formula. It's basically in the pool of all the.
It's
other
still
cash.
there,
It's not
so
something
all the
isolated
cash is,
separately.
okay, all right. I assumed that would come into your discussion, yeah.
All right, Brad?
Seems like best longer term. Gonna yell at me.
So I have a comment for Mike and a question for John. So Mike, I hear you, you're getting concerned about, you know, that number on warrant articles growing a bit. I would just say, you know, we're here to say no if it starts getting uncomfortable, so.
Yeah, no, it's not even a round number, which made me realize it's kind of been moving around a little bit. I remember before, we had like a 2.5 million.
It was
Now,
pretty firm.
You know what I mean? It was like, boom, that's the number. So it just made me think, like, what's the boundary on that?
Right.
Yeah.
And then, to John, so we've had discussions over numerous administrations on what's the correct amount of reserves. And let's see, 2 administrations ago, we kind of ran with the rule of thumb of stabilization, free cash, and taxing capacity. If those 3 numbers together were around 10% of the operating budget, that's, at one time, that was kind of the number we ran with. Is there any sort of industry standard? Is there any kind of rule of thumb that's common throughout the Commonwealth?
There is and there isn't. One of the metrics is that the rating agencies use is around that 8% plus, which we're above that. But there isn't, you know, a best practice. Everybody does it a little bit differently. But
Now, do the rating agencies count taxing capacity or just the free cash and stabilization?
well, anybody that's talking to the rating agencies talks about the excess capacity, that's for sure. They do to some extent. They take all that into consideration, but what they're really doing is saying your stabilization and free cash and however many stabilization accounts you have, that's really what they're using.
Okay.
But they will listen to the argument that we're not taxing to the max either.
Okay.
So we do have capacity.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, so shall we vote some warrants? So I believe number 4 on the warrant is the transfer of free cash to the stabilization fund. Can I have a motion?
Make a motion not to fund that,
Funded at 0?
to fund it at 0, if that's a better way to say it.
Okay, actually, the alternative is to probably withdraw it.
Withdraw it probably
Withdraw it so
makes
we
more
don't even have
sense.
to bring it up.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to withdraw it.
All right.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Any opposed, abstentions? 10-0-0.
Do we have an electronic copy of the warrants?
No, I haven't gotten that yet. I'm gonna have to go give somebody a hard time tomorrow.
That's why you can't find it.
Yep, sorry, Mike. Gotta do some better bird dogging, I think. I got a preliminary version, which I handed out last week.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been updated, so.
Okay.
We have those cover sheets electronically, though.
Right, yes. So number 5 is a transfer of free cash to the OPEB trust fund. Can I have a motion?
So moved, Mr.
So
Chairman.
move for 500,000.
All right. And
Second.
Second, somebody. All right, all in favor? To OPEB? OPEB. 6, 7. Any opposed? Abstentions? 11,000 in the amount of 500,000. All right.
From free cash, right?
From free cash, yes. So I think, David, does that cover
Do you
all
need
the
a-
things from?
Do you need a vote to set the source of funds for Articles 26 and 27? Or can you just do it in the
We
motion
can do
on
it
the
in the
floor?
motions for those, if that's all right?
Yeah,
We don't need a
it's fine
separate
with
vote.
me.
Okay.
We're gonna discuss them tonight.
Well, we won't vote on Articles 26 and, oh, yes, we will. Yeah, we will later on.
That's, we're doing it tonight.
That's right,
I
under
think we'll even do
DPW.
that tonight.
Right.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Thank you, John. All right, so we have another, the next thing on the item is some town warrant articles. I understand that the Town Hall 2 has some DPW and rec items.
DPW does, yeah.
Yeah, we have a rec too.
Yes.
So what, I guess you can take them in any order, whatever suits you for us and our guests.
And start with 7, 8 if you want. You can take those in order.
Which one?
The Mill Pond finished water and the co-op repair.
I don't remember. Somebody's got a mic.
That. Pull it out. Oh, they're on the back, yeah.
I think I do.
So this is, you said this is the Mill Pond?
This is the Mill Pond.
So in the order that they were emailed out in the document, we'll go in that order, just
We can go
just
in
to
that
keep
order,
it
yeah.
simple?
That's totally fine. Nope.
Page 12 in the electronic document.
Say, I don't have it, I'm gonna pull it up now.
Page 12 is the electronic document.
42,000?
The 42,000?
Right.
Yeah.
Now you're confusing me.
Mill Pond, the one on the top, 42,000
I think these are in, there should be an order
in
in,
order.
flip the whole pile over if it's not on the top.
I'm sure, oh, there it is, look at that.
Double-sided
They look
printing.
the same,
Same
right.
paper.
So, last year, we voted to fund the automatic sludge removal system for the Mill Pond so that it doesn't have to go offline to be cleaned regularly. Rely on it, and it's very difficult to shut it down for any length of time without putting the town in a dangerous predicament, and we have to rely on emergency water from Lexington and so forth. This is an additional maintenance and repair project that can be accomplished while the Mill Pond treatment plant is shut down to do the automatic sludge removal. It's not connected to that, it's not really part of that project, but these are things that need to be done while the plant is shut down. Hopefully, once that automatic sludge removal system is in place, we won't have to shut down very often at all. And so this would be something we can get it out of the way, and it would be a reason we didn't need to shut down again in the near future for these maintenance items that it's kind of time to do. So we voted in subcommittee 2-0 to support this.
Great. Hi, Tom, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that Doug handled it fine.
All right, questions, anyone? Frank, or, sorry,
Mike, go ahead, Mike.
Oh,
I wasn't looking when you raised your hand, so.
yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, so Mill Pond, what's the source of water for that?
Well, it comes out of the pond, but we have a pump station on the Shawshene River, so we pump water from behind the tech over to Mill Pond to fill it up. And, you know, when the Shawshene River is running at a certain velocity or certain volume, we pump out of it, and then we fill the pond up, and we treat the pond water pumped into the system.
And is that based on some type of regional agreement on when you can take water and how much you can take?
Yes, it's only when there's certain volume of water flowing through the Shawshene. And I'd lie to you if I told you what it was, but Russ Mackey, the treatment manager, he has, whether it's a flow gauge at the
Shawshene that tells him when he can no longer pump. But it hasn't been a problem in the past. In 16, we had the drought, and that was, a little sketchy, but other than that, it's been a dependable source.
But there are multiple towns that are taking water from that
On
river?
Shawshene?
Yeah.
Along Shawshene, the different towns take, water out of the Shawshene.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Frank?
I just wanted to check, Tom, when we go to MWRA, are we planning to use Mill Pond at its maximum capacity all the time? So, well, let me back up. I'm assuming the water is cheaper from Mill Pond, significantly enough, than from MWRA, that if we could pick it from, Mill Pond or MWRA, we'd rather make our own from there. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the operating profile of Mill Pond may change a little bit once we're on MWRA, because we will use it as much as we possibly can, as opposed to maybe only when we really needed to, based on the well situation. Am I right?
Right, we'll be running both plants until they can no longer run. Vinebrook has limited life with the loss of the wells, but Vinebrook is cheaper than the MWRA to operate. So we'll operate that until there is a need for a significant upgrade.
And Mill Pond's even cheaper than the water treatment plant.
So, we still owe money on Mill Pond from the last upgrade. So, we should run it till it's no longer cost effective to do so.
So are we running it at capacity? In other words, we're running it, producing as much water as it possibly can, given the level of the pond, and...
There's a certain limit on the withdrawal permit, so I'm not quite sure what that is, and I really couldn't tell you at what capacity it's running.
And actually, I don't care. What I'm really getting at is, are we doing everything we need to do so that we can run it at the maximum capacity that it's capable of?
Absolutely, that's, the intent.
This will help us to keep it right up there. Okay.
Right now, we're probably running it at a little more capacity than we should be, especially without having the automatic sludge removal.
I see, okay. And there's no chance of making the impoundment any deeper or bigger?
No, I don't believe so.
All right, thank you.
And my memory from the Water Study Committee last year is that the Vinebrook costs are now about the same as what we'll pay per gallon for MWR.
Right, Vinebrook, I'm sure, is getting more and more expensive.
Right. Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve.
For 42,000.
42,000, second. All in favor? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Any opposed? Abstaining? 10-0-0. Next, the Vinebrook filter repair.
You doing on the tax side?
No,
That's
the
page
next one
5.
Oops, I'm sorry. Let's do them, let's do them in order in the paper that was handed out.
So the back
And
side of it.
Because I was going down another list, that's wrong, not the good way to do it.
So this is the inflow.
So this is
Works if you don't move them around.
I and I.
Inflow and infiltration.
Sorry, no page numbers on this one.
That's page 11, electric.
Or staples.
On the PDF?
Yes, page 11.
So it's in the amount of 2.2 million, 2,220,000. I and I.
Right, this is money that we know we get about 1.1 million a year.
Correct.
And so we're funding this for 2 years. We get a 25% loan from the MWRA and 75% grant to try to deal with inflow and infiltration. So this doesn't actually come from taxes. This money's gonna come back either in a loan that then gets paid from the sewer, I can't remember the name of the fund.
Sewer
Through sewer capacity charges, right. So with new projects and those, that income. So anyway, we fund it for 2 years, so this will cover the 1.1 million for the next 2 years, true?
Well, it will, for the next two phases. So we know what the next two phases are, 11 and 12. So this will, instead of come back to town meeting in a year or 2 years, we know what the numbers are, so we might as well just vote it And this is, no taxpayer money would be used, no taxpayer money, there's no user fee money. This is all funded through 75% grant, 25% loan. Loans paid back through sewer capacity. So it's, it's a great deal, and we're under administrative consent order, so it's something we have to do. So it's a really good program. We've been doing it for a long time. We've been doing, this is the 12th phase of this particular grant loan program, but we've been doing inflow and infiltration mitigation since 1986. So it's something we've been working at for a long time.
Steve?
What is the source of the grant money? Is that MWRA money, or is that?
Yeah, it's actually our money. I mean, we are the MWRA. There's, 51 communities that are members, and we pay a sewer bill every year, and some of that money comes back to us in form of a grant loan.
John?
Thank you. So, at least in a roundabout way, it's obviously ultimately rate money. But I'm not sure how you measure this. As a fraction of our total water supply, what amount of infiltration, what percentage infiltration are we at now?
I don't even have the numbers.
Or how is it even measured?
Well, it's measured based on, so say if we have a rain event, we have gauges, we have meters at the town line. So in a rain event, you can actually see the flow increase, and it's because stormwater is getting into the system, whether it's people's sump pumps or cracks in the sewer mains. And it's something we have to investigate. We do TV inspection, we do flow metering, flow isolation, smoke testing. We try to find these cracks and these illicit connections, and then we plug them. So it's an ongoing battle because, like everything else, the system's, 50 years old. As it ages, it, starts to break down. And so it's a constant evaluate, rehabilitate, reevaluate. So
I guess the harder question is, are we sure it's an interesting number still that we're spending $2 million or $1 million a year on?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so there's a reasonable amount of I&I going on still?
Oh,
okay. Okay.
There's a ton.
Tom?
He kind of answered it. This is an ongoing problem that we will continue to have. It's, there is no permanent solution.
No.
So it's like a boat. It's like a hole in the ocean that you throw money into.
Well, it's like any of the infrastructure.
Just thinking of it.
Say pavement, you could make the equation, it's equivalent to pavement. Pavement, you can do it, and 15 years later, you'll be doing it again. Same thing with any infrastructure. It gets old, it has a useful life of 50 years. We have to invest the money if we want to keep it stable.
Yeah, we're basically relining and replacing sewer pipes to do this, right?
We have many different tools in our toolbox. Lining is one of them, grouting and sealing. Even as minor as putting a disc within a manhole so that when water comes in, there's a disc that prevents the water from infiltrating through the lid and into the sewer system.
All right.
Are our sewer lines, are they made out of cast, are they,
The
they're not
tarp
made?
is asbestos cement.
Oh, it is?
That was the material of choice back in the 60s and 70s.
Okay, so it's not clay?
We have some clay pipe. We have, majority, probably 75% is AC pipe. The newest stuff is PVC, a little bit of cast, a little bit of clay.
All right. Can I have a motion for 2.2 million?
Out of free cash? Yes.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sewer enterprise
Sorry,
fund.
yeah, this is the wrong
This is
article,
sewer,
sorry,
yeah.
yes.
We're not there yet.
No, I know, I'm trying to
Show
remember.
off the free
2.2
cash, will
million.
you?
He knows there's money in
John
there.
and I
There's
are
money
trying
in
to
there.
extend it.
2.2 would wipe out free cash, so this is sewer
Oh,
enterprise.
they still have.
Chairman, motion to approve 2.2 million from the
Second.
sewer enterprise fund.
Sorry.
All in favor?
Okay.
Okay, any opposed? Abstentions? 1100.
MWRA, I think. All right, what's the next one?
I have DPW and rec facility 15.5.
Which one?
This is the DPW and Recreation Department facility for $15,500,000. That's what I have next.
So this is a request to combine the funding approval for Phase 1 and 2 of the DPW rec maintenance facility facility. Last May at town meeting, we approved an article that would fund the design of both facilities, Phase 1 and Phase 2, and would pay for the construction of Phase 1, saying that we would come back and vote on the money to construct Phase 2, even though it's already been designed, at a later date. The engineers and architects have come back and told us that if we would combine them and bid them as one project to be built in the same order, in the same two-phase process, we would save about $1 million. And we had two external independent companies that
Cost estimates?
that both basically agreed. So the $1 million savings is a pretty strong, pretty solid number. We would not borrow the money for Phase 2 any sooner than we would have borrowed it in the way we voted last year. The difference is we can bid it out as one big construction project that's gonna last, X number of years for one company. There's some cost savings there. There's some cost savings in purchasing or committing to purchase the buildings themselves. These are pre-engineered buildings. There's also a benefit to having similar or the same systems, the HVAC systems, the lighting systems. The building themselves will both come from the same manufacturer, as opposed to two different bidding processes where you might not get the same building. So in a long-term maintenance repair situation, that's also more helpful. So if we can agree to combine these two, so another 15.5, we should save $1 million on the total project. It doesn't really speed up the project much, maybe a little. There's a potential of maybe a 6-month time savings, but it's more about saving the money and bidding it as one big project.
And I think if I can add to that too, Doug, the borrowing schedule does not change, so the borrowing schedule remains the same, just as a point of information on that.
Not exactly. You're committing, by voting in favor of this, you are committing to the bond at some point in time. If you didn't vote in favor of this, you'd have no commitment to the bond.
Right.
And so the hole would still be there. So it's on the schedule, but nothing else is gonna get that 15 million, not a school, not a police station, it's
Correct.
it's occupied.
Correct, but we're not taking it all. What I'm saying is the project is coming in, we're bidding it together to save, when you put the bids together, you're saving really the scope of getting the mechanicals done at once, the bid design done at once. You're bringing on the same
Architectural
project
work.
manager, architectural work. But we are not committing to doing both projects. It's not going in conclusively, so we're not borrowing out the whole 15 million at once.
Timing of construction won't change. They're
Correct.
spaced out.
Correct.
But the slot in the bond is now occupied in the bond schedule.
Right,
Probably
but I
2
think
years out. I don't know. When do you think will come up,
I think
Pace?
it was like,
Two.
I think it was 3 years out, wasn't it?
Right.
I wrote it down,
You've lost
yeah.
flexibility.
Right.
Like a school building or whatever.
Well, but, we didn't commit to it. You could come back and say, no, never mind, we're not gonna build Phase 2. But a fairly large chunk of the 20 million that we approved last year was to design and do the permitting and do everything for Phase 2. That's already been paid, committed.
Yeah.
Correct.
You could not do that, but you'd be leaving
My
quite a few
turn.
$1 million on the bid.
All right, my turn to direct traffic. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the proposal on this facility for both DPW and rec department's offices supposed to be located there as well? Do we know?
We have two facilities. The Clark and Reed would be a rec facility with the central maintenance as part of the whole building. The existing DPW barn would then be demolished, and that would be for the entire DPW. That would be water, sewer, highway.
So both offices would be located in this facility?
Well, the rec would have their maintenance folks there.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah.
So they would stay where they are now?
Yeah, and same with DPW. We would have our maintenance people there, but, the administration would still stay at town hall.
I think we're getting confused here. What we're really gonna do is take rec out of the bonds up at Overlook.
Right.
Move that whole operation into the same co-location as Public Works in a brand-new maintenance facility. So central maintenance and rec maintenance are in one place, new building. Central maintenance bails out of the highway garage, rec bails out of Overlook, Overlook gets demoed or something, and the highway garage, the current highway garage gets demoed and gets turned into really a huge storage and, you know, I don't want to say warehouse, but an out-of-the-weather kind of operation.
No, that would be DPW, highway, water and sewer would be in that facility.
The equipment.
Nope, the whole
thing.
operations. So recreation will move out of Overlook. And those buildings will remain, there's a couple of buildings coming down, but they still need storage up there for their, you know, off-season, you know, between the seasons, they need to store their equipment up there as well. And then rec and central maintenance will go to where the Clark and Reed is at 10 Great Meadow Road. And then our highway barn, which is at 1 Great Meadow, that will house highway, water, sewer, just as it does now. All our equipment, all our maintenance, our shops, and everything will go in a brand-new facility.
So central maintenance consists of what?
We have 5 mechanics, and they do all the repairs to, I believe, everything except for maybe fire. I think they repair all the vehicles, DPW.
All vehicles, right?
Okay.
Police.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So phase 1 is 16.5, this is 15.5, so that's 32 total. Was the total originally 33 then?
$33 for what, I'm sorry?
Well, I'm just wondering, was the total originally 33 and it's been cut down by $1 million and it's 32 now? Or was the total originally 32 and it's still 32 even though we're saving $1 million?
I believe we shaved off, because there was,
It was 33.
Brendan's itching to get a word in here edgewise, so.
I think I think the original total was 32.
So,
The original total was 32.
that's what I'm remembering too. So even though we're estimating $1 million savings, we're still proposing an amount that says we're not saving anything.
there's $1 million for the gas pumps out back. That was incorporated into phase 1.
Right, but that was part of the original plan also, as I recall.
It wasn't part of the 32 million. 32 million would fund 2 buildings, and then $1 million was for the gas pumps, which is here, behind Town Hall Annex,
So you're saying including the gas pumps, the original total is 33 then?
33.5.
For three items?
That's the phase 1, phase 2, because phase 1 included the $1 million for the pumps.
Okay, I could be remembering wrong, but I thought pumps were always part of the plan, weren't they?
They're part of the plan, but it was $1 million. That's why.
It was a separate line item for that?
Well, I'm not sure it's a separate line item, but within the estimates for the buildings, we've always said it was gonna be 32.5, or 32.5, and then $1 million for the pumps, which brings it up to 33.5.
Doug, you're looking more quizzical about that, or?
No.
Okay. Okay, so we really are trying to bond $1 million less than we used to before, it sounds like, or maybe even $1.5 million less.
Get to Mike first.
Mike? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there backup to this besides the
That's a good
funding
question.
request?
We can give you the estimates for the,
Project description.
It's very confusing, and for a big amount like this, to just have a couple of paragraphs is, you know, I think
Not
that's
the
why,
usual warrant
that's why there's so many questions, and, you know, there's different pieces going here and then moving there, and I think people, I'm confused, I'm sure at town meeting, people are gonna be very confused.
Town meeting will want an update on the whole thing, and then they're gonna
Right,
better
and I believe
explanation
an
about
update-
what's being done.
I believe an update on the whole thing and a better explanation will happen. I'm sorry that we don't have that here. John Sanchez is out of town. He's on vacation, and Paul Sagarino is not here this evening. I was somewhat expecting Paul to be here to talk about some of the financing part of it.
Yeah.
So this, I mean, it's something that we could put off, we could delay and talk about it again in 2 weeks when we meet.
It's fine to defer it and bring it back when you've got more complete
Yeah.
information together.
I mean, my rule of thumb is the amount of backup should be commensurate with the amount being spent. So
One page
some-
per million.
Sometimes you get like a $5,000 article and there's 15 pictures and it's like, this is great, and then you get a big article and there's like,
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Doug and I are both on the building committee, and we told the big story last year at town meeting. We really pushed it with the PowerPoint and the whole phasing and what we're doing, and I think people forget over the course of the year, and I think we're so familiar with it that it's like, this is common sense, if that $1 million, this is great.
Yeah.
All right, so if that's the case, why don't we just
Yes.
press on and
Let's do
Yeah, we can come back and
table this?
the whole presentation, and everything.
All right, that'd
Okay,
be good.
can I just add one thing, though? I don't, for Ways and Means purposes, we can just get a detailed report. We do not need to, I hope this committee's not saying they want to see the full presentation of the two buildings built out again, is that? Because
just a little more
just
explanation.
to back out, I think, of the description, only because I think the purpose of this warrant, which absolutely tabling it for 2 weeks is okay, but this warrant is the DPW telling you that they think they can save by bidding these two jobs together. So the presentation was made to town meeting last year on the approvals of them. So for Ways and Means purposes, maybe we see the numbers and what that savings is, but not that I don't love sitting with all of you every other week, but a full presentation of the DPW thing. I think the numbers are more important for Ways and Means. If you want to do another presentation at town meetings, on town meeting floor, that would make sense. Here, it's really about a mechanism of, if we bring these two projects together and bid them out together, there is a cost savings to the town just in the bidding procedure. So,
Right, we do
For-
have,
For my purposes, I think if the backup is circulated ahead of time, so we can
Yeah,
be satisfied
that
with the
would be
scope
great.
of work before we talk about it again, then maybe we don't need to walk through the presentation. But if we had, if this hadn't come up for a couple of years till we authorize this again, we would ask for an update. Because part of Ways and Means domain is to make sure that we can explain it to town meeting.
oh, Mr. Chairman, I don't disagree with you that. I just want to make sure that, just for anybody who happens to watch Ways and Means, these numbers, this is really about a mechanism of bidding out two jobs together to save money on the bidding process. So how we present that here is at your discretion, of course. I'm just saying, I don't know that we want to deliver a message to DPW to give the full presentation of both buildings again at Ways and Means. Do we? Is that the?
Well, probably not. Let's find the right balance. Right, but it has faded from memory, both ours and the people who watched
we will
the show.
put together.
Watch us, I
we
want to
will
call it
put
a show, but
together
it's not a show.
brief review. I will commit to a review of the buildings and the original monies, and then the project estimates that we now have from the architects and the OPM.
That would be a great refresher.
And how it changes.
And I apologize, I didn't provide that tonight.
All right, thanks. Tom?
Thank you, Mr.
And then
Chair.
we should move off onto,
Just to piggyback on what Mike said, I would agree with that, especially whenever I see two departments are going to share a building, there's always, at some point, there's going to be a power play struggle. And you need to know who has ultimate authority or who, especially when you've got maintenance departments, hey, we need to have some fields mowed or cleaned or whatever because the demand is on the rec department. Meanwhile, DPW says, nope, I got to use those tomorrow for something else. And it'll probably happen, so those kinds of things need to be sort of settled ahead of time, I'd like to see.
Right, but with all due respect, and I think this is what Sonia was trying to say, that's been laid out many times. One, that's the administration's job, but two, that is literally a 2 or 3 hour presentation. We've had.
And was
It's been
voted.
before town meeting, it's been voted, it's been tours of the old facilities are on BCAT. This is a 2 to 3 year project of explaining those things. And I think they've done a great job of kind of laying out down to the, 5 square feet of storage in a closet, who has access to what, and who's gonna be in charge and who has the key. So in that sense, I just want you to be, confident that has been, very well debated and taken care of. And it's good to know, but,
Well, that's the whole
And-
point.
yeah.
It'd be good to know.
all right. And the meetings are regular and posted, right?
Yes.
All right, let's move on. Sorry to drag you through that without having to come to a conclusion.
Well, okay. A lot of money.
Yeah. What's next?
I believe if I flip it over, it's the historical shed.
Sure.
Historical storage shed. We want a new historical shed. Again, on this, I would like to ask to postpone discussion of this for 2 weeks.
Okay.
There are some possible movements here, and it may be withdrawn.
Great.
And I don't know what the next.
I have water main upgrade replacement, $1 million.
Ditto.
Page 8 in the PDF.
I don't think I have the same PDF with you, because it's not in that order. I've pulled up two, and then neither one of them match.
Roger's site. Sorry, I didn't print it. Anyway. Water main upgrade for $1 million.
So, this is an ongoing maintenance and repair of water mains. This particular one, most of the money would be spent on Mall Road. Is that true? So we have a very old water main on Mall Road, and so they're talking about upgrading that and moving it out of the center median. It's in the grassy median now, is that true?
Yes.
And it's actually in the way of some other things that are gonna need to be updated at some point if we wanna continue to have lights along there. So they would like to repair and replace that water main plus some other projects.
Okay, and for the record, this is number 26 that we talked about when we were talking about free cash, right?
Yes.
Water main replacement,
Yep.
source will be free
Source of
cash.
funding will be free cash.
That is correct.
Other questions about it?
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve $1 million for the water main, let me see if I can get the right wording, for the water main upgrade and replacement, and the funding mechanism would be free cash.
Second.
Great. All in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? 11-0-0. On the flip side, I have DPW vehicle replacement.
Yep. So this is money for 3 vehicles. These have been on the vehicle replacement plan. They're the next vehicles up. There's a little, as John Sanchez explained, age 17 was planned, and they're keeping that as the number because that's the way it went in. Since the warrant request was submitted, I believe age 15 completely failed. And so the head of vehicle maintenance has told them that it needs a new engine. So it was scheduled to be replaced, I believe, next year, and they're gonna flip-flop those and make age 17 last a little longer. So we're looking at a sander truck, replacing that. The other thing we talked about that's important is that as they replace vehicles now, they're making sure that they're equipping them with plows. They're finding that we're gonna be more and more reliant on town vehicles for plowing. And so you'll see that the third vehicle down is a truck for the cemeteries, replacing a van, and it will also be a plow truck. It'll have a plow with it. So a front-end loader, we try to get 20 years out of it. This one lasted 22. They put it off a little longer, but now it's time to go. That's age 37. That's used for loading salt into trucks and also plowing. And then C5A is the van that we're replacing for buildings and cemeteries, and replacing it with a truck that can plow.
So if we're becoming more reliant on town employees to do the plowing work, what does that have, what is the effect on like the salaries that we have to pay them in terms of, in the cost compared to having outside vendors do it? So
Well,
does that mean they're gonna be getting overtime for that, or how does that work?
They're, when there's a snow event, our guys are out, or they're all out. The vendors, or the contractors supplement our guys. It's getting harder and harder now to get, guys to come and work for us, just because, anyone who's plowed knows it's rough on vehicles. I mean, the money's good, but it's not great. And it's not just Burlington, it's a lot of communities that are having problems getting plow drivers, especially the bigger trucks. The bigger trucks, you know, they'd rather not abuse the vehicle and plow with it. So it's not really gonna have an effect on our salaries, because our guys are there. When there's
Anyways, okay.
Yeah, when there's an event, it's
So in effect, it could lower the cost slightly because of the fact that you're not bringing in those vendors.
I think we just can't get the vendors. I know this past winter, and, you know, this past winter, everyone remembers it being a low snow. We had a snow deficit for a long time, but we caught right up. And there were areas out there where there were no trucks plowing, and they would have to steal Peter to pay Paul, and all of a sudden bring some trucks over from another district to try to, you know, plow out those neighborhoods. So it's, you know, it's tough. It's a kind of a juggling when you're out there trying to, you know, move vehicles around and get people plowed out, and why hasn't my street been plowed? It's, you know, put snow out there, so it's, you know, it's a tough gig.
So we have enough employees with the right operator licenses, we just don't have enough equipment?
All our folks are all CDL. Even, you know, some of the plant operators will be out there running 1-tons.
Tom?
You had stated that you were replacing a van with a pickup truck, I think. What was the van? I mean, is it carrying people and is that?
No. I think it was mostly a tool van. Is that true? That's
Yeah,
the way.
it was just a cemetery, you know, cemetery house craftsman, and it was just a vehicle we had. I'm not sure if we purchased it, or it might have been a hand-me-down. It was an 06, 150,000. You know, and the vehicles we have, they're all hard miles. You know, there's a lot of, you know, running around town. It's all local mileage. You know, they run a lot.
Well, the reason my question was is that if we buy the truck, we're not going to be asking for a van in 2 or 3 years now.
No. It's going to replace the same. Tools go in it.
Okay. Yeah, one in, one out.
Craftsman. I think the thing we have to look at long-term, and again, I don't think, you know, John's not proposing buying more trucks that are ready to plow because that's what he wants to do necessarily, but by necessity, it's hard to find companies that we can contract with or individuals with their own vehicles. But I think we do have to kind of look and worry about what's it going to do for the longevity of some of these vehicles, because it is much harder on them. So in the long run, we may have to pay attention to what that does to the 10-year capital vehicle plan, but because it is a little rougher on them. You know, on the plus side, when we get the new facility, at least there'll be places to store the plows, and we'll have the indoor wash bay so that they can get regularly washed and get the salt off of them, which we don't have now. So, you know, hopefully we can deal with some of the rust issues better than we're dealing with them now, and so maybe they'll cross each other off a little.
Would possibly the new facility be able to take care of at least washing the fire trucks?
Well, the wash bay is big enough to take care of.
All right.
It's big enough for even the ladder truck, I believe.
The reason I ask is because a couple of years ago, we had to pay to have a new fire truck because the frame rotted out, and it was because it wasn't being washed quick enough and often enough during the winter. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? So this is for $250,000.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? 10-0-0. Is there a subcommittee vote on that?
2-0.
I assume they're kind of 2-0, right?
I'll let you know if somebody crosses any problems.
Every once in a while, a little feisty.
All right.
John, what's next?
Flip side of that.
Elevator.
Police headquarters elevator, perfect.
All right. Elevator for $50,000. It's actually elevator repair, right?
Controls, yes.
Elevator controls and repair, and this is one of those painful ones because we really know we need a new police station, but
But
that's.
why don't we jack out the elevator and replace the building?
But that's you know, and we talked to John about that, and he said, you know, you're realistically, how many years out are you looking at, you know, 5 or 10 years before we have a new police station maybe, and we need the elevator repaired sooner than that. So you do have to keep you have to keep the facility functional, and the elevator is an important component. So the next elevator on the list, I believe, is fire headquarters, and after that, it's the library. So they do have, you know, 3 planned out over the next I think it's 6 years, and I don't think it was, I think it's every other year he's looking at an elevator, I believe.
I have to look at the capital plan. This is something that's been on our capital plan for a while, and if you put it up, plan, we don't march forward every year.
This is obviously free cash, because it's, right? I guess if we don't say otherwise, they're free cash.
They-
All right, anything else? Questions on repairing the elevator? No?
Mr.
A
Chairman.
motion to approve?
Second.
$50,000, all in favor? All right, any opposed, abstentions, 11-0-0. Rhinebrook filters?
Yeah, this is another painful one that you just have to bite the bullet on. We have 3 filters at Vinebrook for Wellfield C that need to be repaired, and just regular maintenance. And so even though in the long run, we hope to take Vinebrook offline and not have to deal with it, it's not something we can risk. We really, if we lose these, and especially if we were to lose one in the summer and have to shut down that entire well field to fix it, we'd be in scary shape for getting water, even with an emergency supply from Lexington if it happened in the summer. So it's $80,000 that we need to spend, and that filter will still be in really good shape when we close that facility down, unfortunately. You can't make everything die on the same day. Something's gonna be nice.
Sell it for spare parts.
Nice.
Tom?
Yes, just a quick question, how do you repair a filter? You don't have to just replace them?
Well, these filters are like 2 stories tall.
Oh, wow, okay.
They're full of media, tons and tons of media. So all the media has to be taken out. And what happens with we developed a leak, a small, pinhole in one of the filters, and when we unloaded the media, it was the inside, there was corrosion, and corrosion was going right through the steel shell. So they had to get in there, and they had to weld them from the inside and fabricate some supports, and then had to fill it back up with media. So it's not like you can take this filter, and there's 8 filters. You can't just take one and move it, because you'd have to unload it, and then there's no guarantee that filter is not in as bad a shape as the one we're repairing.
Right, we have some that are unused at the closed well fields, and so we even talked about, why can't you just take one of those and move it over? Unfortunately, those well fields aren't piped together, so you couldn't just run the water over and through. And the majority of the cost is the removing and replacing the media, so even if you did that, you'd have an old filter that you'd probably have to rehab and then refill it anyway. So, and sadly, we have 2 more that will, so it's John's expectation that next year he's gonna ask for one, and the next year he's probably gonna ask for one, so. Subcommittee voted 2-0.
Thanks. A few years ago, there were some things, I thought it was a filter that got repainted, epoxied inside and out. It sounded like the same mechanism of unloading it.
That's why we're back again, because that was the filter that they had to unload, and we had to weld it from the inside out.
Okay, and all right, so the repair includes fixing it and then recoating it? Okay, great. Nothing further for $80,000, a motion?
Motion to approve for 80,000.
Great. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions, 11-0-0.
Send all these to the capital budget committee.
Pump station? Rehabilitation? Is that the grant?
You got it.
Is that the right
Yep.
one?
That's it.
It's A1 anyway.
So this is an ongoing maintenance and repair for our sewer pump stations. Constantly trying to repair before things break, because when some of these pumps break, then that's a much bigger problem and a much more costly problem. So Tom can probably give you more detail, but.
Yeah, we have 14 pump stations in town, and we've rehabbed a couple completely. We've done Lucaya, complete renovation, Terrace Hall, $10 million renovation with a force main. We went through, we did a study, 2012, looked at all the stations that were left, and they're all running on 1960s technology, and they've been cobbled together over the past 50 years. So we made a hit list of things, 3-tier priorities. We went through and asked for, I want to say it was, I think it was around $500,000 or $600,000, and we did all the tier 1 over the course of 3 years. So now we're looking at maintenance money. So we'll take the $50,000 and we do things like some pump in the station has to be replaced, we'll replace it before it breaks. Pumps, so many hours, after so many hours, instead of waiting for it to break, we'll have it rebuilt. Controls, SCADA, all those things we stay on top of. So we don't want a station to fail, because when they fail, then someone's basement's gonna fill up full of sewage, and we don't want that.
This is funded from sewer enterprise, correct?
Yes, correct.
Questions? Frank?
So when we, when we rebuilt Terrace Hall, didn't we put pretty modern, updated pumps there?
All brand new, completely renovated.
So this is other than Terrace Hall, you're trying to get to all the others with the same level of modernization?
Not quite, that was completely brand new. These are just keeping these existing stations code-compliant, well-maintained.
So, okay, one of the things was we could save a lot of, I thought, energy costs on variable speed pumps and that sort of thing. Are we doing that here?
Done that already. All the stations
I
are
see.
VFDs.
So what are we actually repairing then in these stations if they've all got new pumps?
Anything that needs to be repaired, they have VFDs, they have drives, they don't have alternative pumps.
I see,
So
okay.
anything,
So this is a general maintenance program, really?
Yes, so that we have a work order system, we track maintenance on all infrastructure. So if we know a pump's gonna last, I don't know, 15,000 hours, when it starts getting up to that amount of hours, let's rebuild that pump, rebuild the motor, whatever it needs before it breaks.
Other questions? Anything else, Frank?
I'll say, thank you.
Motion to approve $50,000 for pump station rehab, and funding is out of the sewer enterprise fund.
Great.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions, 11-0-0.
Quick question, Richard.
Yeah, Tom?
Thank you. When you're rebuilding, do you use stainless steel hardware
For the pumps?
for water pumps, yeah?
I really couldn't tell you how they rebuild them. A lot of some of the pumps are bought, they're brand new. Some will, First Electric over in, some of the pumps there, or the motors there to get rehabbed. A lot of the impellers, though, they'll just wear out, but I'm not sure if they're stainless steel or if they're regular steel.
We on to stream cleaning?
We are.
Great.
This is kind of a regular article, an annual,
I'm sorry,
the stream cleaning.
oh, stream cleaning,
One of your favorites.
Sorry.
Yeah, we've been doing stream cleaning and drainage repair for many years now. It's, the streams, they fill up full of sediment. We have a lot of neighborhoods that discharge into a stream and then flows into, eventually down to the ocean. And these, most of the time, they get sediment build up, and it was a lot worse when we used to use a lot of sand. That's gotten a lot better now, but still, there's, sins from the past. So we select streams based on, initially it was because flooding complaints would have neighborhoods, say, like Susan, that whole neighborhood used to flood because a lot of the pipes were actually under the sand. They were no longer exposed, so I think we've got all the critical ones, but now we identify streams that have problems. So when we do outlet inspections, if there's sediment buildup at the outlets, those will be tagged for stream cleaning. This particular year, we're looking over on CETA, so from CETA to Eastern Ave. In that neighborhood, there's a stream back there that we want to clean out. And there's also drainage repair on Cary Ave. We have a block drain over there, which we got the blockage cleared, but there's still a major obstruction in the pipe, so we're gonna dig that and replace that. And so these funds will be used to undertake those projects.
All right, questions?
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve $200,000.
Second.
All All in favor? Opposed? 10-0-0, thank you. And I've got ornamental streetlights, is that next?
I have library roof.
Oh, and do the library roof. For 220,000.
So, this is to finish the sections of Mall Road with the ornamental
Oh,
street.
sorry.
Library roof.
Library roof.
Sorry, Doug, I didn't mean to slip you a curve there. I said the wrong thing.
I think you have the same, mine are all out of order as well.
Yeah.
Unless I gave you mine.
Mine are completely
Alex,
upside down.
which one did I get?
All right. So the library roof this is the original roof. They've dealt with leaks for a while. They have most of the leaks handled now, but it's not gonna, I mean, it's time to replace it. This is just the time to replace the roof. We did have a bit of a discussion because it's also coming to be time to replace the HVAC system, and so that'll be a lot of work up on the roof. But they don't feel like that it would be smart to wait. It might be 4 or 5 years out, so it's time to replace the roof now. It has been on the maintenance schedule.
All right, questions, anyone? Tom?
With a rubber roof, do you go over what's there, or do you take off the old one?
No, they removed the entire roof.
They do?
It's ballasted, the stone up on top of the roof, so they'd remove the ballast, remove the, I think it's like a loose lay rubber, and then insulation underneath has to be replaced. So it's, it's a whole system. We have, we don't do roofing. I mean, we're engineers, but we will hire a consultant who specializes in roofing systems.
Any other questions? If not, for $220,000, a library roof?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? 11-0-0.
Okay, now,
Now,
ornamental lights.
Yeah. So this is another of the, this is the last one. It's easy enough. This is another one that Town Hall 1 recommended for, to pay out of free cash. Is that true? Street lights?
Yes.
Yes.
So that would be the funding mechanism. So this is to both repair the wiring and upgrade the lights on Mall Road, the street lights. If you drive down Mall Road now, you'll see that there are ornamental lights in some sections that some of our commercial properties have agreed to pay for as they did upgrades on their property. There are some sections now that we don't foresee getting anyone to pay for, and so we need to do that. At the same time, what we really need to do is repair wiring in that area, and as we upgrade the light, the spacing of those lights needs to change, and so we can tack on and finish up that area with the ornamental lights with this money.
Question, Frank?
So are ornamental lights LED?
Yes.
Yes.
Everything in town is LED right now.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess I'm just trying to sort of write down, do we have, is anybody adding up all these free cash articles
1.5 plus.
for these ones that are presented tonight?
I believe the town side came in at 1.5 or a little more.
Yeah, but we haven't talked about all the town side ones left. These are just the DPW ones.
And so is this one, this is 1.1?
Minus 2 million, because we're taking, no, you're right. Yeah.
This 1.1 million is out of free cash.
Right.
And then like the vehicle replacement, 500,000 roughly out of free
We're
cash.
talking about two
different things.
Two sets of free cash.
Right.
Okay. Frank, you-
So we gave each side of the house about $1.5 million. It comes to 3.5 something total.
523,967.
Okay. And then in addition to that, we're taking out of 2 more of the DPW ones,
Okay,
the ornamental lighting
Okay.
and the pipe repair.
okay.
It
gotcha,
could have been
gotcha.
bonded.
Okay, I got you. Okay.
So there's
Correct.
separate-
They're in addition. That makes
Okay,
it 5.1.
Okay, I was trying to add it all up, and I'm like, these are big numbers. We're blowing
this
through
is-
the budget here. Okay.
You need a log scale for this.
Right. This is extra free cash. Well, sorry, you should never call cash extra, should you? All right.
Thanks.
Brad?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Tom, I mean, I'm for the lights, but I do drive Mall Road quite a bit, and, you know, the end toward Vinebrook, the Vinebrook Plaza there, lots of slurry seal. Road's functional, road doesn't look great. I imagine repaving all Mall Road, it's not, it hasn't bubbled to the top of the list for road maintenance priority, but I'm just thinking that if we're to the level of thinking aesthetics for Mall Road, I mean, I'd lean toward addressing the road itself rather than ornamental lights if we're talking $1 million, but what's your thinking on this?
Well, we do, when we have a pavement management system, and Mall Road, we do bits and pieces when it needs it. Yeah, sections have to be done, but we also have other things in the works, like, for instance, the mall. We've worked with the mall to entice them to build a sidewalk along Mall Road. So we don't want to, we want to make sure we have all infrastructure done before we start paving. We don't want to pave a road and then have to tear it up. And we also, we monitor the pavement condition. If a road is satisfactory, if it's serviceable, then we try to stretch as much life as we can out of it. I know a lot of people, while you're there, why don't you pave it? But, you know, Mall Road's, 3-4 lanes of traffic, that money can go to other roads that really need at that time. So it's kind of a, it's a balancing act. And it's money. It's a money game. We don't want to spend money unnecessarily. And that's why, some of the Mall Road is we do it in sections. We'll do segments that need paving, and the ones that are service, we let them fly for a while.
Okay, all right, okay, thanks.
Anything else? David?
The poles that we're taking down and replacing, I assume those are, do we save those for other uses down the road, schools?
Some
or-
we save to have in stock, and some are just junk.
Yeah. Tom?
This is probably for Dave and Frank. So based upon, if everything got approved, based upon what I see about Town of Burlington proposed use of free cash, that would leave us with 923,967?
Plus
4
4.
million.
Plus the 4 million.
4,923,000. Oh, I got you, okay, all right, thank you.
We already put the 4 in, then we did everything else, and we had the 923 left.
Gotcha.
And moved that in addition.
All right, okay, all right. Well, thanks for doing that, Frank. Good for you.
Mr. Chairman,
You can spend it if you want.
motion to approve 1.1 taken from free cash.
Second, all in favor? All right, opposed, abstentions, 11-0.
Thank you, Tom.
DPW, I think that's the list, right? Except for the 2 that we deferred? Thank you very much. Raise, thanks for coming. And.
Well, good night. No, I'm only kidding. Thanks for coming.
Come on up.
You know, come and listen.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
This must have been we didn't get this electronically.
There's backup there. We should have had these guys go first.
That's right. Except it's a 6 megabyte file to mail around.
Get some kickback.
Not personally. Sonia, you gonna do this one?
No?
Oh, come on.
Well, the chair's doing a good job. Leave me.
So the rec department really has 2 warrants, but one is to accept the will of Marshall Simons, which we'll vote on in a minute, but this is the one where we're spending money. This is to repair and replace the lighting system at the tennis courts and skate park. Last year, they repaved both of those, and in the process damaged, some of the underground wiring and some of the infrastructure was damaged. And when they went to repair that, they realized that it was really kind of old and decrepit and beyond repair, and not able to put back online safely. And so this is going to bring that electrical system up to code, replace the lights with high-efficient LED athletic facility lighting. So be a nice addition and necessary if you want to do anything on those facilities after dark.
Brendan, do you have anything, Mr. Even, do you have anything to add?
So as Doug stated, we repaired the courts last year. They'll come back this spring when the weather regulates to paint them and install the nets. But in the process of putting the fence in, they did hit a wire. We repaired it. And in the process, the electrician looked at the current condition of the poles and lights. They're in metal boxes up the post. The posts are probably 40-year-old, 30-year-old old telephone poles, dried out. They have metal clips holding the Romex cable going up. They've been sitting in the sun for 20-plus years, baking, and he was not confident in putting the system back on and having it last. They are halogen lights, so we looked at replacing them with LEDs. What we've done is been able to get an estimate for LED lights, go from 12 poles that light the 4 courts there to 5 poles that will light the 4 courts there with more efficient light and a less spill off into the neighbors across on Church Lane. It was not an anticipated project, but one, there are only lit courts in town for tennis, so this is the only court that someone could go out on in the nicer weather after it gets dark and play, and we felt that it was an important project to see through this year.
All right, thanks. Questions? Frank?
So you have a list of projects that you're trying to do this year, right? And this is one of them?
This is our only project
The
this
only
year.
one?
Yes.
So the trust fund, the Simons Trust, couldn't cover some of this or all of it?
They did cover part of the paving for the courts and bought some skate park equipment for the skate park. We did not ask them for funding. We just got our number for this year, for this coming year, last week.
And it is?
The disbursement for this year is $70,862.05.
Okay.
John?
Do we have any sense of how much nighttime use these courts get?
They get used, I already got calls to turn on the lights, and I had to let them know that we don't have lights going on this summer. But they get used all the way through November. As long as the weather is good, they're getting used for tennis. So we had 2 tennis courts, we had the skate park, and there's a street hockey court. They're all busy, but we've had a call for pickleball. So we took one of the courts and put 4 pickleball courts in. So they will be, it's new, but it is something we get called on all the time. Can you add a pickleball court here? Can we get an outdoor pickleball court? By putting one there that is lit, I think we're going to see an increase in usage there.
All right. Tom?
Yes, actually, quick question, and then 2 quick questions, if I could, please. So, do you get any complaints from the neighbors for the noise for tennis, or?
No, we haven't. There's a new house there now, an older house was taken down and built a new house, so as far as the new neighbors, I don't think they've been in for a spring or summer.
Did the call for pickleball come from Frank?
No, it did not.
It did, it did, yep.
Okay. I guess my question is, I know that in other communities, what they'll do in the wintertime is they'll take an open area, whether it be a field or something like that, and they'll enclose it in, they'll flood it with water so you can use it for skating. Has the rec department ever come up with an idea for anything like that, or ever thought about it?
So we have had a small rink at Simons on the upper baseball field the last couple winters. This year, we did not do it because there's a issue with the water shut-off that came at the end of the season, so they're gonna look to repair it this spring or summer. We didn't wanna turn on the water and have the valve break and then have a winter repair. It wouldn't be good.
If you do something like that, it would be nice if you would please announce it. So, announce it just so everybody knows in the
For
town.
skating,
Yes.
we have, the problem is, we don't get, long enough cold stretches to keep ice for a substantial amount of time. I think our winter brochure this past year was the ice skating from last winter. The cover was skating last winter, but we are looking at possibly doing the street hockey court. It does have boards. We'd have to get sheathing to put over the cement. And then we do have a hydrant behind the Visco building that could feed. You know, we'd need some length of hose to get down there. But that's something we're gonna look at for next winter, especially with lights,
All right.
new lights.
Anything further? If not, for $220,000?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor? Frank, you up on this one too? You're on the fence. You don't have to be. I just don't want to miss anybody.
I'll vote for it.
All right, opposed?
Frank's not voting until he gets his pickleball.
Abstentions?
Yeah.
11-0-0.
Roger, do you know if they're putting the 5G cell boxes on these lights as well?
That's out of order. They're gonna put 5G everywhere, as far as I can tell.
Ball field
but-
at all.
Chair, just a quick,
Yes, Tom.
just so, Brendan, just so you know, I just think that an outdoor skating in a town adds to the ambiance of any community. It really does.
We have looked at, we definitely looked to talk about it at meetings.
Yeah. Oh, good, good.
We had it like the last 2 years, but the weather's been, sort of,
Yeah.
in the middle of, the upper ball field, but, definitely look, especially because the lights there.
Yeah. Yep. Sure.
We will do it.
All right, thank you very much.
Will of Marshall Simons, are you accepting money or no?
Willa Marshall Simons?
Yes. The other one is the first reading of the Simons, the will of Marshall Simons. And again, the figure, disbursement figure for that this year is $70,862.05. They just, as I mentioned, gave us that figure. So we put together a list of projects that we'd like to see. The trustees vote on it, give us feedback, vote on it, and so that number will be the same. The list of projects will be hopefully ready for town meeting, depending on how quickly. There has been a change in in the bank trustee, so, you know, that's been a little bit of a change in how quickly we get things. So the person distributing the funds from the bank is new. This is the first reading. The second reading will be in the fall, at fall town meeting.
So do we need to vote to approve the
To
reading?
accept the money?
To accept?
Yes, you,
Okay, we do. So,
Mr. Chairman, motion to accept the Marshall Simons fund at
$70,862.05.
Yeah, because I want the nickel.
Second, yes.
all right, all in favor to accept money? Shouldn't get much disagreement here. Thank you. Opposed, abstention? 12-0-0.
Mr. Chair, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, Tom.
Brendan, is there a plaque up at Simons Park somewhere to discuss who Marshall Simons was and what he did?
There is a plaque on the entrance, I believe in the, I will look and see.
Okay.
I'm want to say there is. We just did a time capsule there last year, and but there was a stone there. I will check.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Anything else? All right. I sent around 2 sets of minutes to review. Are we ready to, people ready to vote on those? There's March 13th. I brought the wrong March 13th. No, actually, I do not have March 13th, sorry.
I thought they were like April, the first, last week and the week before that.
Right.
It was March 23rd.
March
and
20th and
April 3rd.
April 6th.
April 3rd.
April 3rd, sorry, just last week.
Right.
Quickly, I forget. All right, any comments on the minutes from April 3rd?
I had one. If I remember correctly, the air conditioning that we voted on in Francis Wyman was the second floor and not the first. I think
No, it was for the first
It
floor.
was for the first? Okay, then I misremembered.
Because previously, they had done the second floor,
Oh, and then,
and
I had thought they were doing the second floor in stages. I think that's where my misremembering was. They did half the second floor one project, and they came back to finish the second floor.
well, this is year 3.
So this is the first floor? Okay.
They finished the second floor last year, and then,
Makes sense, because it's hotter on the second
No,
floor, so
yeah,
they've done
okay.
that
Right.
first.
Then I'm off by a year.
okay. Can I have a motion to approve
the April 6 minutes as typed?
April 3rd.
April 3rd?
Sorry, it's April 3rd, excuse me.
All in favor? Any opposed? Looks like 12-0-0.
Abstain. I
Oh,
wasn't.
abstain. 11-0-1. And minutes from March 20th.
There was a small typo in it. There was an STHAT instead of that, but other than that, it was fine. Sorry. Oh, there was a small typo. It says STHAT instead of that. I can point you to it. It's just a small typo.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve the minutes
Second.
as amended.
All in favor? Okay, 5. That's 10. And 2 abstentions?
Abstain, yep.
Okay. 10-0-2.
Phil, you're abstaining.
Sorry, I see typos.
Phil's abstaining.
Typos are good.
As amended.
Nice, that's good. Good minutes. That's the end of the agenda as transmitted. Are there any other comments? Actually, I've got something. Tom?
On behalf of the Board of Directors of People Helping People, I want to thank the people of Burlington who responded to the table at the high school. We received a little over $300 in cash donations, and about 350 pounds of food was brought, of non-perishable goods. And again, thank you very much for supporting us.
All right, so,
And congratulations to the victors, especially Mr. Gallagher.
And everyone who put in a hard-fought race.
Yes, that's right.
so apparently, next week is school vacation week, and I guess typically we don't meet that week, but does anybody have an opinion one way or the other?
How are we looking overall, schedule-wise?
Given that we have covered all of the school warrant articles and a big chunk of the town ones, I think we're in pretty good shape, but I haven't gotten a final list with numbers to check them off. So I think one more meeting would probably do it.
So do we know what warrant articles are left, for sure?
Well, the list that I passed out last week, which needs to be updated because it doesn't have numbers on any of them. There are a series of contracts, funding the contracts, which I don't have an update on, but it's still early, so I'm not sure they'll get
So there's,
active.
yeah,
There's a water stabilization fund, accepting Chapter 90 money, MWRA assessments.
So the list is correct then, we just don't have any detail, is that the
I
idea?
believe the list is correct. So I think we've got less than a dozen left.
Do we have any data?
Yeah, you should make sure you assign too, just make
Yes, I
sure.
know,
We have the
I'm
AP.
remiss on getting that last list.
Classification plans. Like
Um,
the economic development director, the
Yes.
line.
So Economic Director, does Town Hall 1 do that? Because it's sort of hiring and
Sure.
personnel thing?
Yeah,
All right.
it's over there.
We haven't even met on it. I'm in favor of it.
All right, so I owe you a list of assignments. I think if it's okay, we'll not meet until the 24th, not next week, but the week after. So some time to get more reviews done and settle things down, make sure we've got everything, and then hopefully the 24th will be the last.
Are you
Last
saying
meeting we need.
we are meeting the 24th or not?
Yes.
Yes, yes, 24th. Okay.
Yes on the 24th, no next week.
Got it.
All right?
Motion to adjourn.
Almost. I know Nick isn't listening, but Nick resigned from Ways and Means due to his elevation to the Board of Selectmen. So we have an opening. If you have suggestions, tell the moderator and/or me. Sort of an inopportune time to have a change, but, and I'll have to talk to Phil to see what he's doing. He was recently.
Mine runs out this year, so we do meet on Wednesdays over there as well, but I don't think it'll conflict.
The library meets on Tuesdays.
Sorry?
The library meets on Tuesdays.
I just came from there, and I think they met on Wednesday.
Ah, well, then you're right.
Almost
Look,
got it.
So I missed that.
in my life, every day is a Saturday followed by trash day, okay? So, all right, so
right.
don't mind me if I get confused.
Okay. Well,
My intention at the moment is to stay on.
that would be great. It would be good to have your input and support through the rest of this season and.
At least until the end of budget season. I'll give you plenty of, and the moderator plenty of notice.
Great. All right. So I'm all set. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn? Second.
Can I second it?
You
All
can.
in favor?
You can just adjourn.
Thank you very much,
don't even have
folks.
to second.
Appreciate the long hours. We did a lot of good things tonight.